Okay, I will call the meeting to order. Can we have roll, please?
Sure. Councilmember Arenas. Here. Councilmember Diep.
Present.
Councilmember Perales.
Here.
Councilmember Esparza. Esparza is not here. Chair Deb Davis.
Thank you.
Record.
All right, great. And Councilmember Esparza is joining us. We have no items on the consent calendar, so we can go directly to the first item on reports, the Airport Master Plan Amendment. John.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. John Aiken, Director of Aviation. With me today is Judy Ross, the Assistant Director of Aviation, and Kim Hawk, our Deputy Director of Finance. We should have a PowerPoint. There we are. So today we're going to kind of talk about the tremendous growth we've had at the airport, some of the challenges that that growth has had to us, and we're going to try and lay out a path forward for the airport. As you know, we've talked about it a few times, SJC has been one of the fastest growing airports in the country for 3 years, 2016, 17, and 18. And 2019 looks very positive for a fourth year in a row. This is kind of our passenger growth over a 10-year period. We've noted a few things. In November of 2017, we hit the 12.2 million annual passenger trigger from the old airline agreement that meant we could start phase 2 with the airline's permission. We chose not to do that because it wasn't the right time for the airport to go forward with that. In late 2017 or September of 2018, we hit 14 million annual passengers, which was the capacity of the 28 gates that we have. And you may recall we added 2 gates that year, gate 29 and 30. Shortly after that, we added the 6 gates that we opened earlier this year. As you can see, we're calculating ending up with 15.7 million passengers this year, and going forward, even at a reasonable 3% growth rate, we end up at 18 million passengers by 2023. The passengers per gate continues to surge. Passengers per gate is a metric that we can use to illustrate level of service. If you see the 2 red lines on the chart, one was the high during just before 9/11, and one was the low of the Great Recession. Inside that range of the 2 red lines, we have a level of service that's achievable and comfortable for the passengers. As you see, we left that back in 2016. We've been above it ever since. Even though we've added 8 gates, we currently sit at 448,000 passengers per gate, so well above the red line. So let's talk a little bit about phase 2 at the airport. Why now? The airport has approval from the airlines in our new lease agreement to continue looking at phase 2. 11 of the 13 airlines out at the airport have signed that long-term agreement, committing to 10 years with the airport. While the airport's added 8 temporary gates since 2017, it did not add any supporting infrastructure. So no baggage screening, no more ticket counters, no more passenger screening, etc. The airport continues to experience challenges at peak hours. Given the time requirement for procurement, design, and construction, we need to start talking about this now. Demand for air traffic will only increase with the new downtown corporate and residential projects that are online. And the high quality of service from the airport helps attract and retain downtown and other corporate partners in the San Jose area. What happens without phase 2? Increased congestion, impacts to passenger experience, potential delays, declining levels of service. In Terminal B, with all 8 TSA checkpoints open from the hours of 5 to 9, we still have the queues line up all the way to the ticket counter on the first floor. And increased flight activity could require hard standing of some of the airplane gates, which is where we park them off terminal and you take a bus from. So the next steps for our facility modernization: we need to complete our EIR and master plan updates. We need to accomplish some precursor projects that open up the space for the new terminal, and then we need to get into phase two's construction. The green area to the right says terminal expansion. That takes us out to 42 gates. You can see the growth is all to the south. Just wanted to give you kind of an orientation of where we're talking about the project. The change out to 2037. It'll incorporate some airfield safety improvements and modify the landside facilities and allow the airport to grow up to 42 gates. The new environmental impact report will discuss and biology and the overriding considerations that we'll be asking council to approve for air quality and greenhouse gas. The approval process will begin with public hearings, the Airport Commission, the Planning Commission, the county's Airport Land Use Commission. The precursor projects that I referred to earlier, we have a few of them in progress. One is the new parking garage on the economy lot that we got permission to start a few months ago. A new aircraft rescue and firefighting building that is 80%. And then the police department hangar, which is a Measure T project. I'm sorry the mic keeps going out, but some of the future projects, a cargo building for belly cargo, but this will be a real estate transaction, a P3, where we will rent the land to somebody to come in and develop it and be the landlord for us. Parking structure in the terminal zone, new fueling station for our fleet, and new terminal aprons that are again funded by the FAA at 80%. Some other interesting projects for us, a new hotel, which will also be a P3 real estate transaction, and then the runway incursion mitigation, which is the airfield safety projects. That's 80% funded by the FAA. In phase two, we will be building a new Terminal C, which is basically a mirror of the current Terminal B. It'll have 16 permanent gates, plus ticketing, baggage claim, baggage screening, checkpoints, a new central utility plant, and extensive stormwater mitigation measures. I think we got ahead of ourselves. There we go. As far as phase two planning, we're going to release an RFQ for program management support services, hopefully in the spring of next year. A design build contract for RFP to build the garage and the terminal building. As far as financing, we'll start with commercial paper, hopefully in the summer of 2020, to fund the project until we get a guaranteed maximum price negotiated, at which time we'll secure bonds for that amount to cover us for the remainder of the project. And the airline agreement requires us to consult with the airlines on the design process, and with our partnership anyways, it's important for us to be lined up with them, so we'll continue to do that. Financially, the 6 gates that we would gain out of this project would generate $165 million of annual economic impact to the community and to the region. The numbers above kind of talk about how we got there, but we're figuring about a 50% new flights on those gates. The flights valued at about $7.1 million a year comes out to the $165 million. The construction impact, $1.1 billion is our estimate, 6,000 annualized jobs, and 10,648 indirect and induced jobs. There you go. So we did a financial analysis to kind of work through this, starting out with our passenger scenarios to kind of describe what we were looking at when we were modeling this. We have a base case, which basically says we'll stop growing at these record paces. We'll grow at the FAA average of about 2% out into the future. To make sure that we could afford to pay for this, regardless what happens with the economy, we modeled 3 other scenarios. An economic slowdown, where you could see we had a couple years of 2% decline and then growing back out of it. A recession, where we took a little deeper hit, 10%, and then a smaller hit, and then a grow out of it. And then a deep recession like what we experienced in '08, where we had a fairly significant decline and then grew out of it. Each one of those 4 models will be displayed here and show you what that means financially for us if we took on this project. So the first line here is the CPE adjusted for inflation. You may remember back in '08, we set the $12 CPE at $2,007, and we've adjusted it up to show it kind of in perspective. The next one will be the base case, which remember was a fairly positive, idealistic approach of not having a recession and not having a correction in the market. But that base case shows us staying well below that $12 inflated CPE. The next one, an economic slowdown, it increases a little bit. The following one will be the recessionary one, gets up about $22 CPE. And then the last one is the deeper recession. The key on the deeper recession, the blue star that you see there that's lined up with the green vertical line, would be the first time in the airport's history that we would have to trigger extraordinary coverage, which means we couldn't meet all of our debts. But the airlines are obligated under the agreement to pay the balance. So in that scenario, we don't miss it by very much. I wanted to explain the situation a little. We miss it by $900,000 of paying our bills. So the airlines would have to contribute an extra $900,000. Just because I can't pay my bills doesn't mean the general fund steps in. The airlines step in with extraordinary coverage first. Additionally, since it's only $900,000, I have about $14 million worth of R&R that I use every year. It would be simple just to say, we're not going to change the carpet this year. That'll save us $1 million. Now we don't do extraordinary coverage, and we do the carpet the following year. So there are a lot of options for us to work our way out of this. But I wanted to lay out how it would look just with no changes to the assumptions that there was one year that was bad for us. The next chart is just kind of the numerical values that went into that line chart. I was just guessing some of you might like the numbers better, some of you like the line chart better, so I gave you both, but it reflects the same information you just saw on the line chart. And this kind of shows you a very rough ballpark schedule for the projects. The first 4 are currently in progress. That's the Economy Lot Garage, the Fire Station 20, the facilities relocation, and the PD hangar are all in some level of start. The master plan amendment approval and the environmental we're hoping to bring to you in the spring to the whole council to approve. That would trigger our ability to start the following projects: the cargo building, the fueling station, the terminal parking structure, and so forth. I wanted just to lay this out for you to show that there's still time for us to talk about this. We plan on discussing with council several times before we actually make any motion towards going down this road. And that even at this rate, which is an accelerated rate, the building doesn't complete till mid-2024. And that's the deal of the number of passengers I have now and building the building now. Because it takes so long to build it, I'll have quite a few more passengers in the building by 2024. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you, John. I've got 2 public speaker cards first. John Cordes, and then Blair Beekman. Roland, is that for this item? Thank you. You'll be third.
Good evening, council members. John Cordes speaking on behalf of myself. I'm a resident of the Bay Area for over 40 years now. I'm glad to see more people coming to San Jose Airport and helping our booming economy, but I'm really disappointed with many aspects of this plan and the future forecast for our for the airport. It's very backwards looking to me instead of being forwards looking. Two things right away that jumped out to me: to spend $42 million for 900 new economy parking spots works out to $46,000 for a parking spot. We should not be building any more parking spots. That $42 million should instead be going to creating transportation options that will get people where they want to go instead of having to park at the airport. The same thing goes for the $115 million, $28,000 per parking spot, that the plan is forecasting for 4,000 new parking spots in a new parking garage. Again, a vast waste of money that we should not be spending. We should not be encouraging people to drive more. We should be encouraging them to find alternative methods to get to town. Other airports are not being so dramatic in expanding their parking. That's backwards thinking. We need to figure out how to move people and not cars. So please look at that when you're looking at these plans. The other point I want to make is I have bicycled to San Jose Airport. It is not an easy place to get to. There is no facilities on any of the roads to make it possible to get there by bicycle, even though you have bicycle lockers in the parking garage. Again, very difficult to get across. So nothing in here about doing that. It does not align with your access and mobility plan. It does not align with your regional transportation plans, and it does not align with your climate action plan about trying to do a massive mode shift of getting people to stop driving. So this plan is very backwards looking and is not taking into consideration all your other plans that you say on how you want people to get around in San Jose. Please send direction to council and to staff to fix this plan so it aligns with all your other plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Blair Beekman?
Hi, I wanted to try to offer a few things on this item. What was just spoken was really nice to hear. You know, conversely, to speak to what I think the city has tried to offer here in this presentation, they have given us a worst case scenario, and hopefully we can grow and build a positiveness out of this worst case scenario. We've seen the worst here. And now let's hope what was just suggested, we can work towards our best and what's most positive about ourselves at this time and about our future that's positive at this time. I had a quick question. I'm hoping this issue also will have to deal with grant funding planning will be asked for. Is that correct on this item? There's some grant, okay, there isn't, okay. That's for another time. So I guess that's about all I have to say today then. And good luck on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Roland? If you have a speaker card, can you give it to Louis on your way? Thank you.
So thank you for the presentation. I think this is really exciting, and I'm in particular excited about the additional parking we desperately need at the airport. But through the chair, the only question I have is this CP slide we thought, well, you know, it doesn't, I mean, we all know we're staring at the great Trump, at least recession, if not depression. It's just not a question of if, it's a question of when. And we were told by staff the maximum exposure that the city is going to have is $900,000 because, you know, the airlines are committed. Well, through the chair, my question is what happens if the airlines go bankrupt? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll turn it to my colleagues for questions. Councilmember Perales.
Sure. Well, on behalf of the chair, I'll go ahead and ask Roland's question. Is there an answer in regards to what happens if the airlines can't pay that $900,000 for whatever reason?
Well, I think the idea that all 13 airlines would go bankrupt at the same time is kind of an extreme thing to happen. Even when we had the Great Recession of a few years back, you saw consolidation. You saw some of the very minor airlines perhaps go bankrupt, but the main group of airlines stayed strong rebuilt their business model to maintain their ability to still serve. And I think the airport would take that approach, that it may not be all 13 players. It may be a different group of airlines, maybe 10 or 11 that are staying, but those 10 or 11 would pick up the $900,000. And again, like I talked about, there's a lot of things that we can do inside our budget to solve a problem. I know it sounds stupid to say 900,000 is not that much money, but in a budget where you have a $14 million renewal and replacement fund to replace carpet and paint walls and do that kind of stuff, finding $900,000, finding $2 million would not be something that I would sit here and say, I'm nervous about doing this. I'm not sure we should go forward. I'm sitting here saying I'm comfortable, but I wanted to, if I manipulate the base inputs to a model, then it becomes unrealistic. So I kept them the same and said, I'm going to have a $14 million R&R account, and showed that there was a negative effect. I wanted to talk about a change to the model instead of making the model not realistic and changing those variables in there. So I feel comfortable with even the economic depression, Great Recession kind of scenario, that we can get past those couple years without much trouble.
And that's $900,000 total, so that would
Total
be
for the
shared.
whole year.
Yeah,
For all of the airlines to
combined,
pay.
yeah, not each airline.
Not
combined.
each one.
So I'm curious about the, thank you for answering that. Curious about the hotel opportunity here and what sort of progress or discussions, or just where that opportunity is at today. I know that that's a little bit further out.
We've hired a consultant to start modeling the opportunity. I sat with my staff, and we realized that our consultants are paying $600-700 for a hotel room because we're short hotel rooms in San Jose. So the idea was, maybe I should take a couple acres and make some money on it and service, the San Jose area with another hotel. And what kind of convenience having a hotel in walking distance to the new Terminal C, right across the street, great opportunity. So they're working through the scenario to prove that there's a business case. That way we can build an RFP to go out to a developer again, not city money, not airport money, to a developer to say, hey, here's all the facts, do your own homework, and propose to us a hotel and a revenue share and a rent part that will, make a good financial deal for the airport and service our community. So we're anticipating getting the RFP for that out next summer. After we get the environmental done and we get through that, we'd be releasing that RFP. But again, it's a no risk to the airport or city because we'd be doing it as a developer project.
Can you point me to the kind of location that we're looking at where this might be possible?
Why don't you go back up to the map? Okay, so you see the giant consolidated rental car garage, the big white thing that looks kind of bent. Just to the right of that will be the new parking garage that I talked about. And then you see the asphalt change colors in that parking lot. That southern piece there is what I'm looking at for the hotel. So it'd be in the southern part of that loop that you drive around, right, to stay in the airport loop. It'd be that southern piece of that loop, looking at probably a 6 to 7 story hotel that could get about 330 to maybe 350 rooms in it. Have some conference rooms, so business group could fly in, have a conference with some people, and fly back out. So kind of a very convenient operation, but that's about where the location would be.
Is that currently daily lot 4? Is that
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I didn't know if you would know that, so.
I'm just looking at it. No, I don't. I'm not going to lie. I'm looking at a Google map. So,
Yeah.
So just one of the things that, and I don't know if this would be an opportunity, but considering that we're talking about no risk to us in getting, hotel operator, private investment here, the one piece that's obviously been missing for a long time is a connector along Skyport to the light rail. Now, I know we're talking about an airport connector to Dearborn, which I think is great. But we also know that is not necessarily going to come overnight. And additionally, the opportunity along Skyport to connect to light rail is not in anybody's forecast either. And so I think that we may see some opportunities with this faster Bay Area measure and some other possibilities. But if we're talking about a private potential investment here, and maybe if we did actually invest into it to support that, I think our investment would make sense to create some sort of connector over to to light rail, whether it was some sort of I don't know, like what Oakland did, some sort of aerial shuttle, whatever it may be. But right. I do think that the idea of having a hotel there, I think is great, and I think that could be very successful because we're lacking that, and certainly being connected to the airport, you find that in many airports, especially in bigger cities. The one piece though to connect those individuals, right? They're all going to want to connect through a car now, and that's unfortunate, knowing that the light rail is literally just a hop and a skip away. I know we still will have the bus routes to go through, but nonetheless, I think that would be something that's worth the conversation if we begin to talk to hotel operators and as that process works out.
And this program still maintains the access that we have pre-planned for the underground tunnel. We have a plan to, when we did that connection from First Street, was to tunnel under the Guadalupe and under the Conrack and have a station on the airport. And we spent a lot of money to preserve an access point through the garage and through the terminal zone, and that will not be disturbed even through this process, so that if it becomes the right connection and Deer Dawn's maybe the future connection, we still have that opportunity to do that alignment.
Okay, great, thank you. No other questions for me.
Other colleagues?
And I'll make a motion then to accept the staff recommendation or staff update.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions before we vote on the motion. On this slide, the terminal expansion, so will the current 10 gates that are open stay open during construction? Will they be able to stay open?
Yeah, the way we designed the 8 gates that are there now, they sit just outside the footprint of the permanent building by 4 feet, so that there's enough room to get up and put the skin on the permanent building. So that's why the new building is so, if you've been in it, it's very skinny and very long, because I wanted to stay outside that footprint so that the new building will go up with those gates. Because if I took those gates away, then I'd have passengers shoved in a very small, in the rest of the building. So it was very important to keep those 8 gates operating during construction, and we're very much able to do that.
Okay, great. And then, as I was looking at this, I know that we've run out of parking lot space on the terminal side. So, what happens after 2037?
The normal for the FAA design, master plan design process is to forecast out 20 years. And so we forecast out our demand to that point. And it is really a very broad brush. And so forecasting to have the 22.5 million passengers, forecasting to have this much vehicle parking demand with nothing else changing in the environment is all we can do with what we know. I think if there was additional need for parking, the master plan puts 6,000 spaces on the long-term parking lot. We're only putting 900 more for a total of 2,000 spaces. So there's still room out there to put more of a garage. So, and if it's not needed, if we come to the point where we're now using little Uber helicopters or whatever to get back and forth to home, we've discussed this new garage in the terminal zone having ceiling heights that would allow us to convert the top 2 floors into, my office space for my staff, for the city staff, or for an airline staff. So making it flexible enough that it can serve a purpose today, and then maybe reinvent itself, right, in 10 years when we're all flying around to get to the airport instead of driving and parking. So that's kind of in the back of our head as how we should be designing this.
Great. That's very helpful to know or to be reminded, because I think we've talked about that before, about the parking and having convertible space, which I think is very smart to do. The other question I have about that is, where would the terminal expand after? I mean, it looks like we're going to be basically meeting demand and not creating excess supply by doing the 42 gates. And so I can imagine that our airport will need a further expansion at some point after this, whether it's 20 years in the future or more, but where would it go?
Realistically, it would probably have to go north, and it wouldn't gain many more than another 4 or 5 gates. The original 1997 master plan looked at 49 gates. We're looking at 42 right now, and so maybe you add another 5 or 6 to the north, taking Terminal A and then A+, remember that kind of, you walk down that path into the other building, moving that out and, aligning it and stretching it a little bit. But there is going to be a point where a 1,000-acre airport has to stop. And, you look at Denver International with 30,000 acres, they could build terminals all over the place. Right. We've picked a very tight spot between a couple major roads and a couple major freeways, and a downtown and a downtown area, and we placed an airport there. And so I think realistically we need to look at, after we start getting to the point of 42 gate saturation, is working with the airlines to exchange an RJ that moves 50 people and saying, we need to upgauge these things. I need to move more people, which means I need less small planes, and more of the regular size planes, and get that growth through upgauging, because that RJ that moves 50 people takes the same space on the airport as the 787 that can move 250, 300 people. So looking at it realistically, we may have to start working that way with our airlines when we get beyond that 22, 23 million passengers.
Okay. So there's a point where we won't have any more room for any more gates.
Yeah.
And we're getting close to that with this extra, going to 42, if 49 is our limit, we're almost there with this master plan.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. And then you had talked about, more passengers per plane, and that you were talking about kind of the crowding. When they upsize their planes, will we have to do anything with the terminals to accommodate more passengers in the same number of gates?
Not really, because the hold rooms are already set for a 737-900, right? Okay. And so if that plane's there, it's fine, but it would take the same real estate on the ramp to park a little RJ that handles 50 people.
Gotcha.
So the ability to give them seats and a place to go have a drink or a sandwich still would be there, because we were planning that space for a 200-seat airplane.
Okay, great. I had one more question and I can't remember what it was. Oh, I think it was about the hotel. The Councilmember Perales asked about it. And then in terms of the cargo building, so you said that's a public-private partnership?
Yes.
Is that would be lease payments to us then?
They would pay us rent payments for the land they use, and then potentially a percentage of their gross, kind of like a concession fee. And that would just be for belly cargo. That wouldn't be the FedEx or the UPS, but it would be the boxes that go in the belly of the commercial airplanes, which there's actually quite a bit of that. Okay.
And do we get the FedEx and the UPS planes at San Jose?
Yes, but that's just cargo, not belly cargo. So it's kind of categorized separately, but we have both FedEx and UPS operations at the airport.
And then do they use the west side?
No, they use the extreme north end.
Okay.
And they use the extreme south end of the airport.
Okay. Thank you. And then I I think that's it for my question. Oh, no, I did have one more. The bonds that need to be secured don't need to go to a ballot. Is that correct?
No, our revenue bonds do not go to the ballot.
They do not, no.
Okay. I didn't think so, but I just wanted to make sure because I couldn't remember. We didn't do this since I've been here. All right, on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Thank you.
And that will get referred to the full city council for January 14th.
Great. And then our next item is Regional Transportation Quarterly Activities Report.
Thank you, John Russo, Director of Transportation. We've got the next three items, so we'll be jumping into this one right away. I believe Zaire is going to do this.
John, can we take them one by one because I have different comment cards first? Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so Jessica Zank, Deputy Director for Planning and Project Delivery, and I'm here with Zahir Golzada.
Zahir Golzada, I'm the Division Manager for Regional Projects, and I think I have my mic off.
Great, and as soon as the presentation's ready, we'll get going. You do have full information about activities on major regional projects in the memo that was sent. Today, we're going to highlight some of the more significant ones, especially those that aren't coming to council anytime soon for other reasons. So I just wanted you to have that sense. All right, next. We're going to go through a couple of transit projects, and I'm going to turn it over to Zahir to talk about the East Ridge to BART Regional Connector and the Highway Program, and then I'll cover the Faster Bay Area program as well. All right, so the BART Silicon Valley project, I think everybody is familiar with this map. We wanted to make sure everybody was aware of the activities underway. I think everybody's probably heard in the paper, there's been a lot of information about this, but for those who aren't following the Phase 1 extension, the 10-mile extension is undergoing train testing. That train testing is going on for the two stations in Milpitas and in San Jose at Berryessa North San Jose. And then significant planning and design and engineering work is also underway for the Phase 2 extension. That's the 6-mile extension with 5 miles in a tunnel with 4 stations. Now the formerly named Little Portugal 28th Street Station along East Santa Clara Street, the downtown San Jose Station, the Diridon Station, and then in the city of Santa Clara, the 4th station alongside the New Hall Yard facility. So first with Phase 1, BART and VTA recently announced that their safety and pre-opening testing would continue into early 2020. We did want to make sure everybody is aware that at the end of this calendar year, the new transit facility at the Berryessa North San Jose station is opening. So the station will be functional for transit services. Not all the lines will change until the BART system is open later in 2020, hopefully in the spring. We'll keep everybody posted as to when we get updates about that. The Phase 2 project also has had some significant milestones. They did get more than $124 million from the FTA earlier this fall, which is a pretty substantial milestone and significant because it indicates FTA support for a full funding grant agreement. VTA has not formally applied for that program yet, but is working on the 10% engineered plans to submit for that grant in 2020. So we're doing a lot of work, and you'll hear next week about some of the collaborations on transit-oriented communities around the BART stations, as well as progress on the design and engineering for the Phase 2 system. All right, so here.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to cover is I'm going to cover the East Ridge to BART Regional Connector as well as the regional projects. And to start off, the East Ridge to BART Regional Connector is a I just want to make sure we're on the right side. 2.4 miles light rail extension from Allen Rock Station to Eastridge. The project is being done by VTA and is currently in the final engineering with the anticipated completion of final design in fall 2020. The property acquisition will be underway and utility relocation agreements are being finalized. And the relocation utilities will start in early 2021, I'm sorry. Some upcoming activities include implementation of the community working group, excuse me, presentation of coordination of construction impact mitigation plan with focus on noise, vibration, and traffic mitigation. And VTA is working with city to have the city take the lead on the art element of the project, similar to the BRT model. And we are currently working with VTA on an agreement for that scope, and we'll be soliciting of artists soon thereafter. Going on to the regional program, on the regional highway side, I'm going to provide updates on several projects listed, including the US 101 De La Cruz Interchange Project, the Charcot Extension at 880 project, the 280 Winchester Interchange, the US 101 Blossom Hill Interchange, as well as the US 101 Mayberry Oakland Interchange and the US Zanker Overcrossing projects. Just to start off with, the US De La Cruz Trimble Interchange project proposes to reconstruct the US 101 Trimble Road De La Cruz Interchange and replace the bridge over US 101 with a wider structure to improve traffic operation. As shown in the green, it will also include a separate facility for bicycle and pedestrian to improve safety when traveling across the interchange. Estimated cost for the project is $68 million. We are currently in the final design, and the design is anticipated to be completed in 2020, and construction will start in early 2021. The project is included in the North San Jose Area Development Policy and the VTA 2016 Measure B sales tax program. So it will be funded through Measure B. The Charcot project, extension project over Interstate 880 will extend Charcot Avenue east over 880 and connect with Oakland Road to provide a local safe multimodal facility that will improve roadway, bikeway, and pedestrian network connectivity in the area, including access to North San Jose industrial area. The project is currently in the environmental phase, and it is anticipated that the final EIR will go to City Council for final approval in April of 2020. The design will be completed in 2021, and construction to be completed by 2024. The project is included in the North San Jose Area Development Policy and the VTA 2016 Measure B sales tax. Total project cost is estimated to be about $50 million. The next project is the 280 Winchester Interchange project will provide a new access from northbound Interstate 280 to Winchester Boulevard to relieve congestion and improve traffic operations around the Stevens Creek and Winchester corridor, including operational improvements to the 280-880. It will also improve bicycle, pedestrian, and transit accessibility in the project area. Currently, we have developed and are studying several alternatives, and the project is estimated to be about $140 million. It is anticipated that the environmental phase of the project will start in 2020. The design will be completed by late 2022, and construction will be completed by 2024. The project is included in the 280 Winchester Boulevard Transportation Development Policy and the VTA 2016 Measure B. And the US 101 Blossom Hill Interchange Improvement Project will add bicycle and pedestrian improvements while also providing additional vehicle capacity. The scope includes the construction of a bridge structure over US 101 between two existing Blossom Hill Road bridge decks to accommodate the additional one vehicle lane in each direction, and install a Class 1 separated bicycle and pedestrian structure seen in the green up there along Blossom Hill Road over US 101 to improve accommodation for pedestrians and bicycle from Xander's Crossing down by Monterey to the to Coyote Creek Trail in the east. The design will be completed by the end of this year, with construction to start in late 2020 and completed in 2022. Community is very supportive of this project, and it will be one of the first few highway projects in Santa Clara County to be built with Measure B funding. The total project cost is estimated at $42 million. The US 101 Mayberry interchange project proposes to construct a new interchange at US 101 and Mayberry Road to accommodate the following: alleviate traffic congestion at US 101 Oakland and US 101 McKee interchanges, and improve local traffic circulation and freeway access, and provide access from US 101 to Berryessa BART station area. The proposed interchange is situated less than 1 mile from the adjacent Oakland Road and McKee Road interchanges, as depicted by the red circle, and therefore does not meet Caltrans minimum interchange spacing requirements. In accordance with Caltrans requirement, the city has completed the necessary traffic studies to analyze the effects of the new interchange at Mayberry Road and the mainline freeway operation. As a result, Caltrans has conditioned the project with additional auxiliary lanes, driving the cost of the project up. Also, as part of the process of looking at alternatives, we are currently looking at Berryessa as an alternative to Mayberry to better address the congestion in the area, and the U.S. mainline, specifically near Oakland Interchange and the 880 U.S. 101 interchange. This alternative will require modification to existing Oakland Interchange to better address the current issue of weaving between 880 101 interchanges, as well as the Oakland interchange on and off ramps, which is significantly contributing to the congestion in the area. And this congestion actually goes all the way back to South San Jose in the commute hours. The base projects at Mayberry is currently estimated at $67 million, and the full project with Caltrans additional mitigation of added auxiliary lanes, the project is estimated at $87 million. The project is included in the North San Jose Area Development Policy and the VTA Measure B. And lastly, the US 101 Zenker Overcrossing Project proposes to construct an overcrossing at US 101 connecting Zenker Road to North 4th Street and Skyport Drive, as well as modify and consolidate existing US 101 on and off ramps to improve access to and from 101 and the San Jose International Airport, and enhance pedestrian and add an enhanced pedestrian and bicycle facility within the project area. Currently, we have developed and are studying several alternatives. We have been working with the developers in the area to make sure those alternatives are coordinated with the development activity in terms of right-of-way requirements for the project. The project is estimated to cost around $150 million. It is anticipated that the environmental phase of the project will be completed by late 2022. The design will be completed by late 2023, and the construction will be completed by 2025. The project is included in the North San Jose Area Development Policy in the VTA 2016, Measure B. Now, I'm done with the highway update. I'll turn it back over to you, Jessica. Thank you.
All right. This is the last portion of the Regional Quarterly Activities Report, which is about Faster Bay Area. This is a potential transformative transportation measure across the 9-county Bay Area that a variety of groups, including the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, Bay Area Council, and SPUR, are working on. The proponents estimate that this could raise up to $100 billion over 40 years. Its focus is primarily on transit and on connections to transit in order to create a different type of accessible Bay Area. Staff in the Department of Transportation have done some thinking about potential Santa Clara County, not just San Jose, but Santa Clara County priorities, and wanted to share those as drafts with you and get your feedback today. That includes, from the project side of things, let me step back one moment and say that as we understand from the Faster Bay Area proponents, they're looking at a mix of projects and programs, so specific projects that might be funded by this, as well as programmatic categories that could live beyond any particular project. So thinking in those kind of categories, we've recognized the importance of Diridon Station to the entire region, and particularly the city of San Jose. The Caltrain corridor, and aiming towards the high growth scenario envisioned by our partners at Caltrain. The airport connector, which we just talked about in the last item, as well as getting much better transit to the west, out Stevens Creek, to the West Valley, including De Anza College. And finally, we see these last two, the airport connector and Stevens Creek, as well as the work underway with the BART system, as part of a much-needed South Bay metro system. Essentially, that metro system, that's a term that we're using just to define high-quality, high-capacity transit. The Eastridge to BART connector is another example of that, where we have fast service to the places that we need it. This South Bay metro system is currently an idea, but it's one that we think should be considered for further development with something as transformative as Faster Bay Area could be. Looking at the program side of the house, we think it's very important that we focus on transit operations that are affordable as well as passenger-centric or seamless, as well as local transit expansion to connect to these broader regional projects, complete streets and Vision Zero focused. If we want people to use our transit, they need to be able to get to it in many more safe and sustainable ways, as well as active transportation and micromobility focused programs. So these are our very starting point draft for discussion, and we look forward to your comments, any comments you have today, as well as anything that you want to bring to us moving forward. And that is all we have.
Thank you. We have some members of the public who have requested to speak. Robin Romer, followed by Roland, followed by Blair, and then someone put in a card for this item but did not put their name. So if that's you, you go forth.
Thank you. I wanted to obviously comment on the shortcut project as usual. And I wanted to drop something off. Council members Perales and Diep already have this as a digital file as they represent our school district, but I wanted the other committee members to have this as well. This is 150 pages of comments by the school community on the just recently published draft environmental report. And I don't want to go into the details of the comments that we made, but I think it is an issue that we were able to put together 150 pages of comments on this. This is not normal. An environmental study that you paid $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 for should be pretty much unassailable. The consultant should be so thorough that we don't find anything on this, yet we found 150 pages worth of stuff that we feel was not well considered. So I think the community deserves the respect that staff and consultants take the necessary care to really put together an environmental report that goes above and beyond, or should meet the highest standards possible and be as detailed and discuss all the open issues that are involved in this. And I think it's not just as a respect for the community, but also for the council. I'm still hopeful that council come to the conclusion that putting 14,000 cars next to an elementary school is not ideal and should not be done, and that there are other alternatives that should be implemented instead. But even if you move forward with putting that road next to the elementary school, I think it's a complicated process. You still have to certify the EIR. You have to consider overriding, make a declaration of overriding consideration, man. And then as the school district is opposed, you'll probably have to do eminent domain against the school district. And all of this rests on thorough and valid environmental studies. So I think it's in everyone's interest to make this as thorough and good as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Roland? Louis, it looks like we have another card put in the box too.
Sorry, I'm Apologies, I thought Blair was next. Through the chair, could we back up to the I-280 Stevens Creek interchange? So the last time I had a discussion with John, he was still working for the VTA at the time, and we were totally redoing this for $80 million. And I asked John, and we were doing this because Valley Fair, we're adding 1,600, Westfield, we're adding 1,600 parking spaces at Valley Fair. And I asked John, how much are they contributing? And the answer was $1.4 million. And I went, excuse me? And now, here we go again. We're going to do it again. This time, we're going to blast $140 million. And where are we going? We're going to Measure B. Why? Anyway, next slide, which is the real reason why I'm here today. Because this is getting beyond a joke. And I've already been to council about this, and this time I'm getting really upset. So if you follow this green line, it's actually got 2 tunnels there under homeless encampments, and it dead ends on Monterey Highway behind the Arco station. And Xander's Crossing is actually the black mark to the south of the gray overpass that you see over there. But we've been telling these people for years that the only plausible connection to Coyote Creek is via Ford Road, which is that gray road that you see there on the side. Ford Road will take you to the Caltrain parking lot, and then right after that, you've got the overcrossing over the Caltrain tracks that takes you to a complete trail system that goes right through the Cartel Transit Village. And this time, I'm really upset, and if nothing changes, next time I'm here, I'll be asking for resignations. And the last point I have is about faster. And let's go with MTC. I think this is going well. This is where we need to go. And I've actually seen the presentation of MTC. I've seen $400 billion of projects. But when somebody goes around and suggesting the South Bay Metro is a $17 billion BART extension to Gilroy, I will also be asking for resignations as soon as the next VTA board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Blair?
Hi. To consider the VTA and the MTC at this time, to give thanks to the steady good work of the Airport Commission, and what I hope is now ideas of peace and more responsible practices by the mayor and city government to talk about creative economic models and plans for the future of the community. Santa Clara County, the Bay Area, and the future of California high-speed rail is going to have some delicate, complicated environmental planning in the near future with many issues, including individual and mass public transit, fossil fuel automobiles, U.S. frack gas, and overall fossil fuel questions into the 2020s. And how all of this can be tied into the questions of the SJ Airport and building heights, among many other possible connections. And what I feel can be an important theme in the winter of 2019 and 20, there are now years of guidelines and dialogue developing specifically created towards the ideas of peace, human rights, accountability, and sustainability, and how to leave the ideas of U.S. continual war. We are at a time we can again work towards our better human principles and ideals in what can be hopeful, creative, and positive, and that does not have to be dour, gloomy, warlike, and hurtful. I hope Santa Clara County EIR reports that need to be developed in the next few years to ensure the CHSR can travel through the South Bay will very much be considering of how it can contribute to the positive ideas developing around the world at this time. As this can be a time to create a mutual respect throughout the Bay Area, the state, the country, and this earth towards better organized reasoning and good human and civil rights issues and peace. Thank you.
Thank you. If somebody filled out a card without putting their name, you are next. If not, John?
Thank you, Councilmember Davis. I also submitted a card with my name, so if it comes up, please disregard that. John Cordes speaking on behalf of myself. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I wanted to support all the work you're doing to bring BART to San Jose. We need to fix our transportation infrastructure, and this will get us a long step in that direction. I have similar concerns to the messages I announced at the prior item. I see a lack of alignment between plans in San Jose, as all these disjointed plans seem to not consult or consider each other as they're brought forward. For example, all these interchange improvements are going to induce more demand, which will make it harder to meet your vehicle mile reduction goals. So it seems like you're going in two directions at the same time. You're spending all this money and time on BART, and yet you're still upgrading the intersections. I think we need to pick a way that actually meets all the goals for the climate smart plan and improves ability for people to get around, promotes mobility equity, and other objectives that the city has to become more livable. It's nice to see that all mobilities are being considered as part of the interchange improvements. I still would rather not see them at all. I don't support the Charcot overpass. I think there's a lot better ways to spend $50 million. BTA got smart and finally postponed any more consideration of the Vasona extension, realizing it was going to be too few riders for too many dollars, and I think the same thing applies to this. It's a road that's not going anywhere for half a mile for $50 million. It's going to have a negative impact on those students there, so I don't support that. And I'm hoping you will consider the airport connector to be funded sooner rather than later and faster. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on this item? Okay. I'll go to my colleagues. Councilmember Arenas?
Thank you, Chair. So I sit on the Eastern Shabbat Advisory Group, and I thought from what I remembered last time we met, that we were going to break ground in 2020 for just a relocation. So now it says it's 2021. Is it the construction that's anticipated in 2021 and the relocation, utility relocation, you refer that as something different?
It's the 2021 is the early 2021 is the utility relocation. I think that what's taking maybe a little bit of delay is the agreements that that VTA is trying to fashion with the utility companies. There's also the design, and there are some elements of the project where there's noise during construction that needs to be flushed out a little bit more further with the community, so that there's still some work to be done before we can kind of dive into that relocation of utilities.
Got it. So it's the agreement with the utility company that is delaying some of this. Is the property acquisition underway?
There is property acquisition that is currently underway, yes.
And how is that going?
I can get that answer for you. I have to go back to VTA. I haven't heard anything negative in terms of issues, so I'm assuming it's going pretty well.
Yeah, well, property acquisition is always going to be very sensitive, so I just wanted to make sure that we're in the know of that, and as our residents are being approached, that we're also informed, and that way we can have the best response that we can, or
right.
Reroute them to VTA if appropriate. Okay, so it sounds like there's multiple reasons why there is some delay. I know that we've been looking forward to utility relocation, but I can see how working with PG&E at this point would probably delay us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Diep?
Jessica, remind me, was it the Fast Track Bay Area for which a few months ago, like you came through council and asked for like a wish list of like, big, hairy, audacious, like transportation type of things?
Yeah, what a good question. Actually, that I believe was the Horizon call for projects from MTC, but there is a linkage between the two. So last year, about this time, last fall, MTC issued its first ever call for big ideas. And we did come and talk to council about those big ideas, solicit additional big ideas, and then submit them to MTC. Some of those, like the South Bay Metro and the specific projects within that, are actually kind of making our crossover thinking list for the faster project. but it wasn't specifically about Faster Bay Area that we came through asking for that feedback.
Okay. And I know this is like a 9-county ballot measure, and so there are, I'm sure, purposes to raise the funds for instance, just funding BART beyond Measure B's allocation. But do we know if there's a mechanism to kind of propose, whatever portion Santa Clara County gets, here's what we would like to see it happen on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I do want to recognize Jason Baker. He can wave from the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Came to hear your questions today and take them back to the group who's working on this. This Faster Bay Area would need to be authorized by the legislature. Senator Bell has agreed to author that bill, and so we expect that to go forward in January in the legislature. That is the best understanding at this point. And so the leaders of different transit agencies, VTA, as some of you are board members, have been also, like we are, raising questions about what our priorities should be as a sub-region. And we're trying to feed all of that information into the folks who are championing the overall measure.
Sure. Okay. Well, with full recognition that a lot of the report has projects located in North San Jose, I think it speaks to the importance of the region for our city. And I would just say that given VMT and all the changes coming up, I don't see how North San Jose works with just light rail and cars coming in. So we have some opposition to Charcot. There's reasons for Charcot, and let's say we don't do Charcot or something like that. We still have this basin where cars are coming in, and the more we try to put jobs in there and build, you can't get people into North San Jose to work without creating more mileage and more traffic. So what I would like to see potentially is somehow getting BART or something like BART or Caltrain or something into there, because light rail is not going to cut it. And if we're really going to make, keep North San Jose as the job center, there's 90,000 jobs there now. We build more housing, more jobs in there. There needs to be a way of getting people in and out that's not just cars. So just tossing it out there, if Faster Bay Area becomes a thing, somehow making North San Jose viable into the next many decades would be my ask. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Perales?
Yeah, thank you. First question is, do we know where the attachment A is, where it denotes on page 5 of 6? This says attachment A to this report provides an update for the 6 priority projects. This is on the highway projects. I couldn't find the attachment anywhere. No.
It may have been I don't know if it was, but
That
it may
would
have
be
been
an
an issue with
oversight on our part,
the
Councilman.
website.
We apologize. We will get that loaded up.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can you describe what the content of it was?
So here, you can describe it further, but it's essentially the 6 projects and a status update on their timeline.
What we went over today is just the 6 projects.
Is it the PowerPoint presentation that you showed, or is it actually like a
It's
written?
the 6 highway. It's the 6
table.
regional highway projects, overpasses. It's the detail of them,
Okay.
which Zaire did describe. But we'll get that posted.
Okay, yeah,
Our
if you could,
apologies on that.
if you could get that posted, and if you can go back to the image of the I-280 Winchester interchange. And I'm just kind of curious how this, yeah, there you go, fits in with what improvements were sort of done as you're going northbound 880 and exiting Stevens Creek. I know that there were some improvements that were done there already. So how does that kind of fit in with what was done already?
Yeah, so actually the Winchester project was part of a much larger project. It was part of the Stevens Creek 880 interchange project. But when we were moving that project forward, there was a lot of issues in the placement of the Winchester off-ramp location. And it was from a variety of different stakeholders, including Caltrans, the property owners, Santana Row, and other property owners. So we took that Winchester portion of the project out of the Stevens Creek portion of the project. The reason we did that was because we just did not want to jeopardize or risk the larger projects. So we took that portion out to do as a phase 2, and this is what we're talking about, is this phase 2 of the Winchester portion of the project that we took off from the Stevens Creek. By doing the Stevens Creek project without the Winchester piece to it, we are reaching the live capacity of the interchange and the Stevens Creek work that we just did. The reason we are reaching that is because when we did the traffic analysis in this area, we find that about 60% of the traffic wants to go north toward Stevens Creek. About 40% wants to go south of 280. So when we developed this project, this alternative that I presented will put the traffic where they want to go. So that 60% of the traffic that wants to go north will be literally put at the back door of Santana Row and can access Santana Row directly from Tisch. And then the 40% that wants to go south, that traffic is directly put onto Winchester. All they have to do is just make a right turn, or a left turn onto Winchester to go south. What that does is it takes all of that traffic that currently, that 40% that wants to go south, it takes that off of the current interchange at the Stevens Creek 280, 880 interchange there. That's currently everybody's accessing. So that's kind of where all of this is kind of in the context of how this is being built.
And I'm sorry, I guess I wasn't in a frame of where you were at. So when you were talking about 40% wants to go, or 60% wants to go north and 40 south, from where? Where am I coming from?
So if you are on 280 and you want to exit, most folks want to go, 60% wants to go to that north area, north of 280.
Okay.
And that 40% wants to go south of 280. So that 280 is kind of the north-south divider line. And we want to make sure, right now, where we put the traffic with just the Stevens Creek interchange, we're putting them all on the north side, and they're using Stevens Creek to kind of make their way down to Winchester, and then clogs up that Stevens Creek corridor artificially. If we put the traffic where they want to go, so with this project, we will put the off-ramp right at Winchester. They can literally make that left turn at Winchester. They don't need to go north to track back to south area. Right now, they're going north and then tracking back to south through the Stevens Creek area.
Okay, and then you said something semi-alarming, that the current improvements that were already done, that I think just finished not too long ago, are reaching their life, or what?
So basically, when we analyzed the whole interchange with the Winchester, the whole project, if Winchester was done with the first phase, then the traffic is placed where they want to go. Right now, because of the increased traffic is placed at Stevens Creek, that interchange, that additional traffic is basically capturing that additional capacity that we just built. So we need to move that traffic in order to create that capacity that we built at Stevens Creek. And that was supposed to be to alleviate the Stevens Creek corridor. Right now, we're artificially congesting it with the 40% of the traffic that wants to go south. We're putting it up there, and that's where the life cycle of the interchange is reaching its maximum, because we're putting this artificial traffic that doesn't need to be there. But if we build the Winchester, then the life cycle will increase.
Work that has to be sort of undone or redone at 280, 880, or no, it's all sort of in addition to that?
Yeah, when we split the project up into two, we made sure that we did not want to throw anything away in terms of the new interchange that we built.
And then last question, you said that there were concerns with the different parties, like Caltrans and stuff. So we think that we have that resolved, or this will be the beginning of kind of this work to then go through that same.
No, we've been working on a number of alternatives, and each step of the way we've been sharing it with the developers in the area, as well as with Caltrans. And each step of the way we have received comments, but we haven't received anything that would tell us that no, this is absolutely not acceptable, move on. No. So we're really at a stage where we're getting really positive feedback for the alternatives that we're coming up with.
Okay.
And we are going to be starting the environmental phase fairly soon here with the preferred alternatives.
Okay, thank you. On the Faster Bay area, if you can go to that list, I just wanted to add something that I mentioned to VTA, which was rather than thinking of this Stevens Creek to West Valley, thinking of a sort of east-west in total connection. So the one place that we're going to be missing is going to be from BART, essentially around 101 to 680 to where the light rail is, right? That one spur where we have BRT for most of it. If we can get a connection that I think zips right across, east to west, which would be that, Santa Clara, Stevens Creek corridor, this would be great. I think this is missing as well. But I think we would be missing that one link, to connect into BART itself. Fortunately, that's the one place we were able to get BRT, and so you sort of have some of the right-of-way, right, to work with. Anyways, the idea was rather than call it just a Stevens Creek to West Valley transit, I had talked to VTA and Nuri about a sort of, just an east-west connection along Stevens Creek and Santa Clara, granted knowing that BART will take a big chunk of that right through the heart of downtown, but we're not still fully connected. And one of the best examples is, you want to take light rail from somewhere just, north of downtown to Eastridge or the east side. You're better off riding a bike because literally you're looping all the way around, right? It's just, it doesn't make sense. And so I think we're really lacking on that east-west. And this is one piece where we're lacking, but I think that other piece shouldn't be forgotten. And I think it could be included because we're talking about one whole link that just happens to be, would have to be connected as well by BART. But
one of the possible ways of achieving that we've talked about is a direct tie-in of that Stevens Creek to West Valley transit line into Diridon Station. If that can be achieved, then that helps with that.
Let me add the question too on the South Bay Metro system. As you look at a lot of potential alignments and lines and those types of things, would that contemplate the connection that Councilor Perales was talking about? Is that maybe within the scope of that? That's a major expansion of a high-capacity transit, a grade separated light rail, or something even more significant than that throughout the whole South Bay. Maybe talk to that.
It absolutely could contemplate that. I think one of the questions, which was part of why the RFI regarding the airport connector and the Stevens Creek corridor was put out, is a question of what types of technologies might be the best fit, both from a seamless passenger experience and from a best to develop and achieve our desired goals in a reasonable time and cost, right? So I think that the question is kind of how that technology fits in, like literally fits in, but that's a possibility. Also, I think it makes sense with Councilmember Diep's question, because one of the South Bay Metro ideas is, let's make the light rail in North San Jose really, really work by grade separating that light rail such that we're not stopping at every light, et cetera, right? But it's very conceptual at this point, which is kind of why we put it as something that would really need to be jump-started, hopefully by the Faster Bay Area measure. But we can't say what we could deliver at this point.
okay, thank you.
Any other comments from my colleagues? Okay, I have a couple. The trade-off about VMT and making intersection improvements or additions has come up multiple times. Will one of you please speak to that?
Sure, and others can certainly jump in. I think with each of these projects, these are in our general plan, and they are long-standing identified needs. And so what we've been trying to do is make sure that we're making the safest facility, that's both kind of the cross facilities that are city facilities, as well as the safest regional highway corridor, right? Because We can't have the interchanges, as is often happening today, backing up onto the freeways. That can't stand. So what we're trying to do is balance additional capacity to avoid those kinds of safety concerns and backups with additional options for people to truly travel across what are currently barriers, right? With the good pedestrian facilities, good bike and trail connectors. And so I think that there will be more space on these roadways, right, as a result, and coming in and out of the highway. And at the same time, it's addressing safety concerns and giving many more options. These are not, other than the auxiliary lanes and that type of scenario where Caltrans is mandating that, there's not a lot of additional capacity being added through these projects. So here, John?
Well, I would probably maybe even bring it up a little higher, is that and the next item is actually going to talk a little bit about that, the long-range plan on how we actually are going to need to address growth in the city in terms of mobility and transportation. There still will be motor vehicles on our streets, and we're still going to need to be able to design and implement solutions for those. There's still going to be cars. We're trying to actually build all these projects in a very multimodal way, and then add new mobility choices on top of that for the growth. So every one of the projects you're seeing is really a really high level of design for multimodal users, for safety and for access. Not a lot of roadway capacity. It's really reconfiguring these for the most part. So I think that's the way I would probably answer that.
I guess I'd add in one too, particularly for the North San Jose area, but even the other projects, they're tied to approved development plans. So the environmental impact report that cleared the development capacity required many of these improvements. So if we were to kind of abandon these projects, we'd need to go through new planning processes and new environmental clearance to have the development capacity that we have today. And in North San Jose, we also have agreements with the County of Santa Clara and the City of Santa Clara to try and move forward on those. And some of these projects are in those agreements.
Thank you. Thank you all for laying out those, all those reasons for why we're doing these projects. On this slide for the Faster Bay Area priorities, I wanted to ask, the Complete Streets and Vision Zero for the programs, does that include education and advertising, or is it something else? And would it also include enforcement potentially?
We would be looking for it to include all of the above, but to really the most expensive components here, as we've seen them, is the infrastructure. So I would say we're advocating primarily for a programmatic approach to funding this type of needed infrastructure rebuild. Although I think that some programmatic and regional messaging about the importance of safety, about Vision Zero, could certainly be a more effective way of getting the message out than city by city or county by county.
And I would add on the enforcement side, probably automated enforcement would be, I think, a logical thing to consider in a measure like this, given we have other big cities in the region that also want automated speed enforcement in their communities. And given this is a regional measure, it's something that probably could, a very efficient way of having better safety and speed compliance on our streets. So that's something that I could see potentially being part of it.
That would be great. Automated enforcement, which currently we cannot do, correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Did you hear that, Jason? Great.
But we would like to do it. The council's on record.
We would very much like to do it, yes.
We've sponsored a bill in the legislature that's had a hearing at committee, but not quite gotten over the goal line.
Okay. And then I saw on here projects, capital, or Caltrain corridor, so that's capital. What I didn't see on here as a Santa Clara priority, which I think we have to add, is Caltrain's operating. It is the only transit system that does not have dedicated funding, and Faster Bay Area is supposed to be that avenue.
Absolutely. We've done some napkin math on these various categories, and we've included what Caltrain has requested in terms of operating revenue in that transit operations and affordability category.
Okay.
Thank
great.
you for clarifying that. It's
Yeah,
good to put it out there.
I would appreciate that being called out. I don't know if it was in the, I don't remember it from the
No, it was
memo.
not, so it's good to call it out. Thank you.
Do I have a motion? And on the motion, all in favor? All right, thank you. That motion carries, and we can move on to the Access and Mobility Plan update, I think.
Yes.
Ramses is coming down?
Yeah, Ramses is coming down. So just to tee it up as Ramses gets ready for that, this is really the way we consider potentially our strategic plan of how to meet the policy goals outlined in the general plan and climate plan and our smart city. So this is an attempt for the way we're trying to do it is actually put together that strategic plan to identify how to actually achieve those goals. So Ramses is already ready to go. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. All right. Excited to bring this back. I think we've talked about this kind of in spots, but we're about to launch. And so we want to kind of get you guys back in the headspace of where this is going. Well, actually where it's coming from and then where it's going. Do you want to introduce Chester Fong up here? He is the project manager from Arup, who is the lead consultant on the consultant team that we're looking to finalize a contract with. We'll be bringing a contract request to you guys later this month, probably on the 17th. All right, so as we've been talking about, as you all keep talking about, we have really audacious goals to try and meet our climate responsibilities, to try and meet our urbanization goals, to in effect, do all the things we have been put out there. And so we put this chart up as a kind of simple reminder of the kind of scale that these goals are set in, and just kind of keep us on track. Right, we're roughly at 78% now in terms of people driving alone. These are commute numbers. Our general plan shoots us to roughly half of that by 2040. That's a very significant change. Our climate smart plan doubles or maybe triples down on that and goes all the way to 12. It's pretty close to Hong Kong, right? In terms of it. That might be too audacious, I don't know, but it's the goals we have. And as John said, we in DOT take it on seriously as our goal to produce a plan that will get us as far along in these numbers as possible. Our general plan does some really, really good things to help us along with this, right? The urbanization and the focused growth of the general plan really helps. We put this up as a kind of a reminder of that while the population overall in the city is going to grow around 30%, places like downtown are going to almost triple in terms of population. Parts of North San Jose, all the kind of urban villages really soak this up. And so it's something like 85% of the growth is going to land in about 16% of the landmass of the city. This is a really great thing for transportation and for sustainability. And that then helps us kind of capture that mode shift into those areas. So we're focusing on downtown because the numbers are a little easier to grab and the idea is easy to grow with. But what we need to see is, while we need to see the city overall change the percentage of folks not driving in the orange bars there, a place like downtown needs to see a much more significant change. So do we think this is possible, right? So this isn't a first estimation of kind of the total trips per day that we would need to see in a place like downtown to make this work. A couple things to note here. We have a little bit of capacity growth allowed, right? If you look at 2015, we're at about 30,000 trips per day by automobile. We can grow up to roughly 40,000. That's a third increase, right? So it's still pretty big. We have a little bit of wiggle room in kind of trying to figure this out as all this growth starts coming in that we're seeing. But that yellow, the transit yellow is obviously the hugest growth. It's massive. And being able to accommodate that, trying to build for that, is going to be a pretty big order. But as you guys know, we're doing this. A lot of this is already starting to happen in downtown. The Diridon projects, the multiple things that are going to be happening there, of course, BART, Caltrain electrification, potentially the airport connector, all of these things are really helping us there. So modeling shows just with BART and Caltrain electrification, we'll be jumping from 16 to 100,000 folks by around 2030. Right? And then as high-speed rail and then the further Caltrain business plan come in, we're looking at about 140,000. 140,000 is the same size as SFO on a daily basis, an annual basis. So we're really looking at some great investments kind of helping us lead there, but we still have a lot of work to do to figure out how this is all going to play out in the rest of the city. One more example that's worth bringing up. With BART coming in Milpitas, this is the number of Tasman Corridor ridership projections on the light rail. Right? Start really actually seeing this line produce a lot. We expect a threefold increase there, and a further increase into 2040 as that BART line really solidifies and further transit gets built out. So why are we talking about all this? Right? Oh, that looks awful up there. Sorry. We now need to figure out how to make the rest of the city work under these kinds of conditions. How are we going to figure out all the transit, all of the bikeways, all of the pedestrian ways, and still make the car system work, right? And that's what we're set up to take on. We finished off phase 1, right? And we've brought this to you guys a couple times. These are the transportation directives that are going to lead all of this work for us. These are the city's policies around transportation, the goals that are already adopted, kind of brought down into a graspable and immediately readable sense, right? So we can actually kind of say, hey, these are the things the city has told us to do, and kind of distilled that, clarified that, and now we're ready to launch. We wrote an RFP based on these, and that has now been responded to and landed. So now we're getting into phase 2. Phase 2, maybe most importantly, is an engagement process, right? We need to have a citywide conversation that doesn't just get the usual suspects in the room and really helps us get out there. And this is a portion where working with you as council folk is going to be so primarily important. We are working on both really upping our game in terms of in-person engagement as well as online engagement. We're a city of 1.1 million people. We got to talk to a lot of folks if we're going to try and change what the roadways look like. And again, we'll be hopefully checking in with all of you many times to kind of understand how to best engage with your communities. And then, go back one more point there. We're really taking an equity focus here as well. We've already put in conditions of the contract that all engagement must be representative of the demographics of our city in terms of how it's processed. So if there's racial demographics or income demographics that really define how the communities are built, we need to make sure that those things are reflected in how we understand the input we get. Second part of phase 2 is frameworks. And this is one of these big intellectual processes that's incredibly important to engage in, but can be a little bit daunting at times. This is us trying to figure out how do we think of the whole city at once, right? What are the various ways that we can say, hey, if we want to say how we are going to invest, what is an overall framework for us to do that? And so this is an example we've put together already that takes the single occupancy vehicle goal of the roughly 50% reduction from today, and then use some information around the infrastructure and patterns that we already see on the ground, and try to say, okay, this is where we think things can change. The blue being the places where we can see the most change, and the red being the places where those places probably won't see very much change. Right? And thinking about this in this holistic way, I think, is going to be really important to telling the story and building out the strategies. We're not going to try and make Cambrian Park look like downtown. right? That's not a reasonable approach to this kind of thing. And so trying to give ourselves some direction in that, right? How do we properly give the resources out to the communities in the right way that's going to help each community in the most beneficial way to the community as well as the overall system. So from frameworks, we're going to really stick into strategies. And this is really the pieces that actually change the right-of-way, right? What kinds of projects, what kinds of programs and policies do we need to really put in front of ourselves and hammer out and start validating, right? This will be, coming from that overall framework, but really be giving us the actual changes on the ground. All right. These can look like, of course, bus-only lanes, bike lanes, bike superhighways. It can look like new organizations in the car system. They can look like further thoughts on what AV systems look like. They can be policy stuff.
South Bay Metro.
South Bay Metro is one of the ones we're really bandying about. What does it really mean to actually have full high-quality transit throughout the South Bay? All right. Another piece that we're diving into here is organizational analysis. When you reassess your goals and really set the compass for something, you need to make sure that everything is lined up to be able to deliver on that. And so we're going to be looking at how the department is structured, what it can deliver, how that's working, and see if all of the pieces in our puzzle are lining up towards the North Star that we're trying to set here. And that's, of course, both kind of people organization, but a lot of process, right? How does things come in? How do we think about projects? How do we organize? How do we prioritize, right? And the last piece is phase 3. And phase 3 is how we are contemplating making sure that this is not a plan that sits on a shelf or a plan that kind of produces bold ideas but doesn't kind of keep on going. We're going to build a digital monitoring system or a decision support system that will help us keep fresh the goals or keep fresh the projects that we're going forward with. Right, so this system will purchase things like big data around transportation. There's a lot of new data sets out there that help us understand what how people are getting around, how people are making choices around transportation that are new. And we want to be able to ingest those data sets to help us continue to identify projects after this initial list that we get from the planning process, to help us continuously prioritize those projects over time, especially as conditions on the ground change, right? Then to monitor those projects, right? So did they do what we think they did? Right? And so we're doing an exercise throughout this that every project that gets proposed will come with an estimate for how we think it will affect the right-of-way or how people get around. And that project monitoring phase will test, did that actually happen? And if so, we need to kind of say, all right, that strategy is working. If it didn't, we need to go revisit that. And so then we're going to go step forward to strategy iteration. And what's really important about this is that we will continue this will continue to update in a much more regular clip than we're used to now because of the data sources that we're looking at. And that's it. We're really excited to be getting going. This is kind of the starting gun for us. Of course, we haven't signed that contract yet, but we're pretty hopeful. Chester has come down, even though we haven't done it yet. And we're really looking to talk with you about, one, what are some of the strategies that you would really like to make sure get on the list for consideration? What are the best ways to engage with your district? How do we really get in and make sure that the community as a whole is being represented, and the voices that you see as really important can be brought in. And then kind of what are your measures of success, or what are the key performance indicators do you think we should consider as part of kind of the overall monitoring of implementation after this is done?
Thank you. A couple members of the public. Welcome to come speak. John Cordes and Blair Beekman.
Good afternoon, council members. John Cordes, this time speaking on behalf of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. Our mission is to get more people on bikes for more often and more trips for more purposes. We support the development of an access and mobility plan. We think it's great that San Jose is trying to figure out how to put things together. As mentioned in the last two reports, we don't see as much connection between reports as we think is necessary. For example, none of these reports mentioned your Vision Zero plan. Where does that fit into all of this? So we see a lot of holes in the way things are not being put together. A lot of cities are setting aspirational goals for 2040. You know, they want to get to 15% bicycle riding by 2040. Great, but what are you going to do by 2025? You know, and where are the plans that are going to get you to something measurable by 2025? We think that there needs to be short-term measurable goals as well as long distance. We have great advantages here. We have 300 sunny days. We have mostly flat terrain. We're not going to hit our VMT reduction goals and make the most use of this wonderful BART system and everything else we're trying to put in place if we don't have the last mile infrastructure to enable people to get where they're trying to go at the end. On slide 9, I'm a little confused. It shows less than 10K bike trips out of 120K trips total. That's about 8%, but the goal is 15%, which should be 18K trips by 2040. So not quite sure why that's there. We don't support any idea of more driving alone. We support the development of a fact-based decision support system to help evaluate projects. They asked you 3 questions at the end, so here are my quick answers. So what multimodal transportation strategies do you want to see studied? Mobility equity, free transit, no free parking, congestion pricing, and seamless connections. And then with respect to what key performance indicators should the city look at. Again, KSIs, killed and severe injuries. We have to make our roadways safer. We had just had 5 people killed in the last week, and I'm still reeling. VMT reduction, greenhouse gases per trip, resident satisfaction, and an equitable transportation system. Thank you.
Thank you. Blair?
Hi, if it's okay with yourselves, I hope I can focus on the Diridon Station issues and its transformative process it's going through. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. In developing the future of Diridon Station, I am impressed that a flexibility is being considered for station plans as high-speed rail may evolve and make changes in the next 50 to 100 years. The past summer, I have felt a sigh of relief and an air of legitimacy as local governments in Santa Clara County were able to more openly offer reasoned, honest ideas and plans for the future of California high-speed rail. I hope these words can be a reminder of a better community thought and positive energy there can be in wanting to practice a better reasoned, more open process with both the everyday public and with the local Bay Area and state governments. To offer a few thoughts and questions, more questions and thoughts at this time. Can it now be easier to more openly talk about, in less protected, less insecure terms, a few remaining, possibly good reason CHSR extension options through Tracy, the west side of Interstate 5, and its public mass transit planning ideas? And in what can now be an initial simple way to consider is for 2 high-speed rail lines with a sometimes possible third emergency track that can be built alongside and hug the freeway systems entering into San Jose and the downtown Diridon Station. Can this be a good model, as it can cause the least amount of environmental and aesthetic harm? And that an already well-established rail system for freight and Caltrain can stay the same. I'm estimating that this can continue to offer an efficiency and functionality for the future of San Jose, so a larger, raised, more controversial unified railway track system through San Jose may not have to be created. Good luck in your efforts and work. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to my colleagues, Councilmember Esparza.
Yes, and I wanted to ask the team, the ARUP team, or if they could come down and I had some questions about the background. You wrote in here that the team has extensive experience in San Jose engagement, working with constituents, community organizations, and community leaders, and so I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
I'll take the question.
Okay.
And then if we need to, yeah.
Okay.
So part of the team involves or is Corinne Winter's consulting team. So they've worked. Well, one, she used to be the head of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. She's also working on a lot of our outreach efforts already, including the bike plan, and she'll also be on the downtown plan. So there's a lot of relationships already there with her personally and her firm, as well as a lot of understanding of how to reach out in non-traditional ways. For example, in the bike plan, we've done well over 40 in-person meetings, mostly at already standing community events. We have done focus groups in Vietnamese. We make sure that there's, of course, always translators for Spanish and Vietnamese at every meeting. So that's what we're referencing when we write that.
Okay, and because that's really what I'm looking for, and I've said this in some of our other meetings, is I'm looking for more input from residents, particularly from residents who use public transportation or who live in dense housing situations who are not using public transportation. I believe I've spoken previously about the first shift, right? The 3:30 a.m. shift for which they really can't take public transportation. And so how can we, that might be an opportunity to create a carpool program for like that first shift employees or something else where we can get feedback from residents who have been traditionally left out of some of this decision making. And so that's really what I'm looking for in terms of community input and involvement. So that was the one question. Another one was I wanted to again reiterate my point. I mean, there's a lot here, so there are just a lot of different pieces. It's all good. It's all really awesome. I know in the Monterey corridor, we're super excited about our future down there. But in talking with folks about Vision Zero, I know in my district, I know that's changing, so it's okay. But in my district, it's an area that has gone without significant infrastructure improvements for a very long time, and as a result, in the coming years in which we will make those changes and make those improvements, I would expect to see those numbers go down, right? However, the caveat to that is not all of these solutions not all of these issues can be fixed with a median, right? It's like we're talking about automated enforcement, which would be fantastic. But there's also another component. In my district, we've had a few members from our unhoused community who have been hit. And I don't believe a median is going to solve that issue. So is there room in this plan to sort of look at how, when you have the different departments coming together, to how we can address that issue in another way? That maybe it doesn't involve infrastructure, maybe it involves departments within the city working together to address that.
Yeah, so you're referring more to the Vision Zero plan.
Yeah,
right?
it's in here.
Yeah, so
right.
Yes, so was it last month? I think we brought the Vision Zero action plan. Well, we did talk about the action plan. We're going to be bringing the actual components of a Vision Zero action plan back to council in January, I think it is. And one of those components is a much more robust education and outreach campaign for safety for seniors and unhoused and children. And so it's going to get addressed through our Vision Zero plan.
And I guess my point is because I'm looking at sort of the organizational analysis and the decision support system slides, and I think that I'm not sure that education is going to impact that number and that issue. And so this is an issue where I think having different city departments. So for example, if we're seeing a lot of activity and people getting hit at certain intersections, then if our transportation department can reach out to our housing department and maybe develop, pilot some partnerships with the homeless outreach team, working with those unhoused populations at certain encampments, right?
Right. So one of the other key components of the action plan is to form the Vision Zero Task Force, which will include multiple city departments, including housing, police, fire, planning department. It will also include other county departments and other organizations that will be key to actually making some positive change and actually having some real actions coming from that task force. So that coordination is key, and we're setting that task force up actually right now, getting departments and other agencies pulled together to actually do that.
Okay, thank you. And back to some of the questions that you posed to us, I think my office is certainly happy to help with community engagement. I would particularly love to see outreach to schools because you can reach the whole family through the schools. On actually on the multimodal transportation strategies, I particularly also would like to see more east-west alignment. We have a lot of north-south, but I think the east-west is really needed more throughout the city. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Diep?
I think this is pretty good. This is great that we're planning out this far, and Ramses, your enthusiasm is infectious. So I think we have the right person kind of digging into the weeds here and doing this. I really have nothing to add because I don't have the technical kind of know-how that you guys do, but I think this is a good discussion to have, and I echo Councilmember Esparza's comments to kind of get the public kind of input in on this, because I feel that a lot of times government gets a lot of flack for not planning, or we're planning, we're doing it, but people just don't know about it. And this is an exciting discussion to have, and this is kind of what makes local government exciting. So, thanks.
Councilmember Arenas?
Thank you, Chair. So I have a couple of questions and comments. One, I just wanted to start off by saying that I really like this organizational assessment that you're preparing for, because you know that we may not be able to handle whatever or some of the processes that you are going to later identify through this engagement phase. We don't know what those look like, but you're willing to make those changes. And sometimes, bureaucracy is set up so that we can be more efficient, and somehow through that we become inefficient. But I love that you are taking a look internally at assessing yourselves, and then changing some of the people possibly to correspond with some of the framework that you're going to develop. With that in mind, I was thinking about the engagement piece, and I know that you want to make sure that those folks are not the usual suspects that come to the room. So I wonder what your criteria will be to help you identify when do you stop, when do you figure out that you have enough information, enough feedback from those underrepresented groups. We all know who those underrepresented groups are. Working parents that have multiple jobs that just don't have the time to make it, even at home sometimes to cook. So how are we going to get to those folks? And what is your criteria to figure out when when it suffices, that phase, right?
taking a note here so I can answer both your questions, right? So how will we know when we've gotten to enough folks? There's no way to get to enough folks, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's just the nature of what we do, right? You have a city of 1.1 million, everybody matters. And so what we want to do is reach out as much as we can, and we're going to be really looking to you guys to be the barometers on that. We can do as much as we can, but we're technical, right? And while we love our work, and we see engagement as such a necessary component, we're really going to need some help to make sure that we are hitting that barometer. So I hope you'll help us with that. But I do think we've put some base measurements in there in terms of making sure that what we do get is balanced, right? And so I mentioned earlier, we put as a condition of the RFP, actually, that all input will be weighted by demographics of the city. And I think that for us puts in a safeguard around making sure that people that look like me don't dominate the conversation. It happens. It's very easy. Usually they're older than me, but it's the way it is, right? And we want to make sure that we're getting the best input we can and the most inclusive input. So on that question, we will do as much as our budget allows and our creativity gets us to, right? And again, your help in that will be key.
I was going to add one other lens that we're using. As Ramses mentioned, in some efforts recently, we've been trying to do a lot of going to where people already are in different ways, whether that's, pop-ups or whether that's existing neighborhood meetings or existing, property meetings, going to where people are. But then the flip side that we're starting to hear a lot is you, meaning the city, are asking me to go to too many things. Right? And so instead of come to this meeting about the access and mobility plan, and then tomorrow night come to this meeting about, housing issues in your city, and then the next night come to this meeting about parks, how do we kind of, with our other department partners and other outside partners, really start to bring comprehensive information to people in as many, venues as we can, so that we're going to where people are, but then we're also providing some one-stop shops for people, well, this is what I care about. I can't care about or deal with this. I'm not going to show up to a meeting that's just about that. But maybe if it's everything that's affecting my community, I can see how this fits into it, right? So kind of balancing out these different strategies and respecting people's time.
Thank you. I did hear the piece about in the RFI and how you would match some of the demographics. I just wasn't sure how you would do that. So some of the suggestions that I have is at Eastridge, we have one of the most highly used transit centers, right? And so when you talked about pop-ups, why not go to the folks who are actually using the systems? Maybe there's some folks who want to use the system but just don't know how. So those are our neighborhood associations. And as soon as the line changes, I'll tell you that I have a neighborhood association over by Meadow Fair, and this is right next to Eastridge, but when VTA changed the line on Tully, they got lost. They just did not know that now they could default back to Eastridge and go wherever they were going off of Tully. They just had to get to Eastridge, right? And there was a gentleman that would go to Mayfair Community Center for dance classes, and he stopped going to his dance classes until we realized, no, you don't have to. You just go to Eastridge, go to the transit center in the back. But having those changes for folks is so important. So walking with them and having a very good understanding of how people acquire information, right? And lots of times it's word of mouth. And the word of mouth is spread within our neighborhood associations, within our PTAs, within our churches. That's the best way, right? Because somebody else has already kind of vetted those things out. So I was thinking about transit centers. I was also thinking, why not hop on a bus and ask people a survey, on the bus. So I've given you some of the traditional ones, the PTAs, there's a lot of parent universities at different districts, in response to having a certain number of Title I schools, which, that would mean that they have a certain percentage of free or reduced lunches. So that's another way of these are folks who are already coming to certain meetings. They don't have to add anything to that. And yeah, and going to some of our areas where we know are just very highly mobile, like Story Road, like Tully Road, and I don't know, stopping at everybody stops for coffee or boba or whatever is in season. So the other thing that I wanted to, I really like, I think it was John, the in public comment, you added, what would you like to see studied, and you said free passes or free transportation. And so I thought about some of the things that prevent some of our seniors or parents, that they have children under the age of, so children under the age, I think, of 5 are free, right? But when we want to mold the next generation of multimodal residents, I think 5 is too young, right? So I was thinking, why couldn't we study, maybe taking a look at 10 years of age, when kids really truly remember their experiences as something that is life-forming, right? I also appreciate that cost of parking piece. And the last one was, when you mentioned walkable neighborhoods, I was thinking how we connect one walkable neighborhood to the next, and how those are going to come into play. I saw that you mentioned walkable neighborhoods, but I just didn't see that connection between, how would we connect, downtown to Willow Glen, or Story Road for that matter, right? Very walkable neighborhood to Willow Glen or to other parts of the city, because those folks are coming from one place to another walking, right? Anyway, so I think there's some opportunity there to develop that a bit of that concept of how we connect walkable neighborhoods. But overall, really appreciate your report, your enthusiasm. I can't wait to see what the different phases and those outcomes take us to, and what folks have to say about our transit system in San Jose. Happy to join your efforts. Let me know how we can help. We have plenty of neighborhood associations. We have community center. We have Welch Community Center. We have churches. So please let us know. We're more than happy to fold in to what we're already doing, so that way it's not an additional effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, thank you to Diep for his very kind comments that I didn't say thank you to for.
Councilmember Perales.
Yeah, thank you. I was just noticing that these flyers they had from Saratoga to San Jose in 30 minutes. Be nice to get there this day and age, right? In 30 minutes sometimes. So, and this is not an issue or an oversight, but the link is not working. I think it's an issue with our website right now. So I was trying to look at the draft KPIs, but it won't come up. So
I'll make sure to send those to you afterwards so that you have them.
Okay, and I think they'll pop up once I think it's probably an issue with our new website right now.
We were having some issues with that this morning too.
Everybody is. So.
Yeah.
It's okay, looks pretty. So without looking though at the draft KPIs, maybe, because I know that you're talking about what should be considered, could you run through just a couple, kind of give an idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that the KPIs are structured is each one of these, let's go back to here, has a few of them, right? And I think the easiest to recognize ones are the kind of zero, the overarching ones for City for People. Those are really meant as the kind of the kings of the KPIs, and that's reduction of VMT and the mode change goals. Those are the two hard numeric numbers that are given by the general plan and Climate Smart that really are the kind of guiding light for everything else. Under Vision Zero, the earlier suggested is it KSOs? I always forget the right acronym.
KSI.
Thank you. Yeah, that's KSI. Jumping to environmental stewardship, what we've done is do our best to use the Climate Smart report as a guide in that. We don't want to recreate the wheel there at all, and in fact, we see ourselves as weaved very deeply into that process, so we're mostly using KPIs from that report there.
Are these KPIs all numerical kind of data points?
Yes, and we're trying to do some, a little bit of mathizing, some qualitative stuff, because what we're trying to do is keep ourselves honest, right? We're trying we're trying to be able to digest data and give ourselves an objective response. This is doing what we thought it is. This is doing better. This is doing worse, right? And that's really what we're trying to get to. Let's see. Other ones that are kind of coming to mind. There's about 45 of them right now. We expect them to be quite different and narrowed once we get to the end. We just kind of came up with the ones that came to mind as we were going through this initial process. But
thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Rattle anymore. I want to hear all 45 because the website is broken.
Yeah.
So, and it may likely not be on the list, but one of the things I was thinking of was a reduction in overall miles of pavement that we have, road miles, right? So we know that there is a cost to maintaining that, and unfortunately we don't have areas that I think that we are striving to rid ourselves of. I personally do here in the downtown core when you look at smaller streets like San Pedro, Post, but I think that's just a sort of small tiptoeing in. I would love the idea of two different approaches. One, which would be transit only or bus only, right? Or multimodal only, but sans the car, right? So bus and maybe ped and bicycle, something like that. And then all the way to actually eliminating it for any vehicle, including the bus, and just bicycles and peds and streets where you can, sort of allow for only that access. I do think, right, the downtown core is a great place to begin to eliminate some of these roads that, again, down that pathway of eliminating cars and maybe just allowing bus or light rail, and then going so far as eliminating all vehicles altogether. And a key performance indicator could be overall mileage, right, of vehicle for vehicles. So anyways, I think that I think we have to really be innovative, similar to what we were doing and what we've done with our Better Bikeways in downtown, to push the limits, to not get bogged down in, I think, too much, even as though I agree with what Councilmember Esparza was saying. We want to make sure we're reaching the right people, but we also don't want to get too bogged down in implementing new designs like this, because I can guarantee you, if we spent some more time, we would have heard from a lot of people that would have said, don't do this. Just like, I hear that today from individuals that are upset because we've made it more difficult to drive through some of these streets like San Fernando. And I drive it almost, all the time because it's coming around. My colleagues do too, right? We all do if you're driving around downtown. But that's what I think we should be intending to do. We should be intending to make, right, driving through the downtown, although doable, feasible, not easier, but more difficult, right? And slower is fine. It's fine to clog people up in their vehicles through a downtown core if the trade-off is we're making it safer and faster for bicycles and pedestrians and people like me pushing their strollers, right? And you name it. And I think that if that's really, right, what we're aiming for, we have to be bold in some of these decisions, and I think that we were, right, with the Better Bikeways. I think that, and as we go out to some of these other neighborhoods, right, those are the kind of improvements that I think we need to branch out now from downtown, like down Monterey Road, right, and as you're making some of these improvements to actually get people into and connected throughout the different areas, and not just putting bikes off in a trail like the Guadalupe River and say, okay, let's bikes, you're over there. No, I think it's actually making it on the roadway and having the trade-off of parking or a lane, right? And taking that away in trade for better ped and bike access, or bus, right? Dedicated lanes or rail, whatever it may be, but really prioritizing the alternatives. I do, and then if you can go back to the suggestions or the questions you had for a slide, sorry. So I think engaging the districts, we talked about that in the residents within our district. I would say the fatigue is really, well felt right now, especially with all of the major, programs and developments and, plans. There's probably not a week that goes by that I'm not inviting my community members to some meeting about something going on, right? And so I definitely think that to get some genuine input and to make it worthwhile for our community members, on the one end of it is, yes, absolutely going out to them, right? Going out to where they're at and not just having another meeting here at City Hall or somewhere in the community and inviting people to it on that one topic. And that's the other thing, is not just focusing on one topic, but try to actually, create a robust engagement on things that people might, they can pick one or two that they may be interested in, because, like, as you said, they're not interested in everything, and not have it be all focused on this one issue. And I do think that we should take advantage of our schools, we should take advantage of our churches, right, the neighborhood meetings that are already in existence, and partner with the other departments as well, because a lot of times, right, we'll have one presentation we want to give somebody, and we take up that neighborhood meeting, and then the next neighborhood meeting want to do another one, and we can potentially combine some of these, and we can be of help with that too, right? Because we're all, also to coordinate between the different departments. For instance, the Coffee with a Cop, right? The Coffee with a Cop has great conversation with community members where they're just dialoguing. There's really no agenda. But it could be worthwhile to talk with our police department and say, well, we could have an additional agenda like Vision Zero, because it fits in with that conversation. And DOT can now participate. So it's Coffee with a Cop, but guess what? We have information while you're already here, and you got done, you finished your conversation with an officer, and now you go and grab your coffee, and guess what? I'm going to pick up a little info and maybe spend 5 minutes, provide my input on Vision Zero. So I just think that absolutely is something that we need to think about. And certainly I've seen it. I've seen the numbers dwindle from different efforts in my district, and I imagine my colleagues have the same. And I'd be one of those same individuals not wanting to go to so many different meetings. And so definitely, I think that requires a little bit more thought. So that's all my comments. So thank you very much. And I'll echo again. I think this is really great where we're aiming towards on this, and I look forward to the work.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to accept the report.
Thank you. Can we go to the Phase 2 framework that has the map, the heat map? Where did we get this?
We did this ourselves internally. Where did we get the map?
So, I know what the map of San
Yeah,
Jose
yeah, yeah.
looks like.
Sorry,
That's
I didn't
not
understand the
what I'm asking,
question.
No,
Yeah.
how did you create the heat map for the estimated or the goal percentage of trips?
Yeah, so a rough overview of the process is this, right? We have a 50% reduction we need to spread over the entire city. We looked at what is there and planned in terms of multimodal infrastructure, particularly transit, and took some broad brushstroke transportation planning assumptions, like people are more likely to ride bus within a quarter mile of a route. People are more likely to take a train within a half a mile or 3/4 of a mile.
And this is using 2040, so this is using like Caltrain business plan, this is using Next Network, not what we have now, but where things are going to be?
This one probably doesn't include the business plan per se, but it will be updated. This was kind of our attempt internally before we got anything going to kind of start getting our heads in the right place. So it took what we had at that point. The business plan wasn't yet adopted.
Okay.
But as you can see, you do see that Caltrain spine kind of running down through the city. So it did assume values of those stations.
I think it's worth saying this is the city's travel demand model built upon a VTA model. So that travel demand model just makes a bunch of assumptions already anytime about where people are starting from and going to. It also includes socio-demographic, economic data. Like it's a pretty robust machine. And this adds some assumptions and pushes it towards those average of the 50% delay that Ramses was talking about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted a little more info because it's really compelling, and there were some surprising blue spots that I was not sure how you got there. So like the downtown core, totally understandable. I can see how Willow Glen you would get more toward a 50-50 area, but it was kind of further south where it starts to get blue again that it was surprising to me. That's why I was kind of wondering. So that's really helpful. Thank you. To your questions, the discussion questions, I wanted to put in a plug. I know you talked about demographic factors a little bit, and we've heard about schools. I didn't hear anybody say anything about seniors and others with ADA needs. And that's kind of been coming up more with residents of mine about scooter use, because it's not available for, scooters are not available to be used by people without an ability to stand for long periods of time, but also then having where the scooters are put can be limiting in mobility on the sidewalks themselves. And so those are two issues, kind of what I don't even know the answer. I don't know the answer. I'm putting it out there as in terms of multimodal transportation for people with limited personal mobility or ADA needs, and how that, and I think Councilmember Prowse, even with a stroller, you are limited in your mobility, but people who are in wheelchairs or walkers or just cannot walk the quarter of a mile that we were talking about, how can we incorporate strategies for them to be able to take transit because we are very transit heavy on our goals, right? It's really focused on transit. So the last mile problem that people are talking about, yes, but also even a quarter of a mile is not doable for my mother who's had one knee replaced and hasn't gotten her second knee replaced yet, and she's in her early 60s. So we're talking about a pretty large portion of the population. So I don't have any answers for that, any strategies for that. I just want to put that out there. I think it's something that's really important. She's not going to get on a bicycle. And kind of related to that, I know on the east side and other previously unincorporated areas, we don't have sidewalks at all. And we've talked about that a little bit, but I think it has to be in this plan. So sidewalks existing for people to get from their neighborhoods to the commercial neighborhood districts, but also in some areas where we have sidewalks. Japantown has these beautiful wide sidewalks. I used to live there, and we had a dog, and it was just my husband and myself and our dog, and we could walk 3 abreast at anywhere in Japantown. And then we moved to Willow Glen, and the sidewalks are much narrower there, and you can walk. Now we have 2 dogs and 2 kids, and then we walk 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 to get anywhere, because you can't walk 3 across. And so and maybe this goes to Councilmember Peralez's reduction of pavement and streets is actually going into some of our streets where we now have a lot of paint, but actually putting more wider sidewalks as one of our, I don't know if that's a KPI or one of the strategies, but I've even just visually increasing the size of the sidewalk. So for example, in Minnesota, where the sidewalk is narrow, but there used to be 2 travel lanes, now there's a bike lane. More pedestrians use that sidewalk now because they feel like the buffer provides more safety for walking, right? The bike lane provides the buffer for them. So I think that's, you can't beat sidewalks for the quarter of a mile and the last mile and all of that, right? So, Ramses, what do you want to say?
I do want to point out we've just applied also for a for money to do a citywide pedestrian plan that will focus on kind of the deeper technicals of where things are particularly missing and all that kind of
Great.
stuff. So just we don't know if we'll get that. But that
Yeah.
work stream will kind of help support what you're talking about even more than this will, which is kind of looking at these larger strategies, right?
Great, thank you. And then in terms of ways to engage with my district or with other districts, I totally echo the utilizing schools and school events. So there are large events that happen in my district that are related to the schools. For example, the Willow Glen Elementary 5K, but other schools do walkathons as well. It's a perfect tie-in. And then, of course, the walk and roll events, the walk to school day. But I was also thinking, we have some, and I know Councilmember Crosco's not here, but she has a giant National Night Out event. And that's where you're getting families and everybody's in kind of in one location. And some other, I don't have any real large. I have one National Night Out event that's bigger than the others. Mine tend to be smaller. But we do have a senior walk. Vice Mayor Jones and I have a senior walk that we host every year in the spring at Valley Fair. And I know there's a senior walk at Oak Ridge. Do you do one at East Ridge? Yes. So those would be good places to get our seniors. And those are, I will tell you, the seniors that I see at the senior walk are not the ones who come out to neighborhood meetings on a regular basis. It's a completely different set of people who come to that. And then I'm sure you guys have already thought of this, but Viva Calle is like the perfect place to get, because people are out, but they're not people who are often out on the streets. They just come because it's super fun and there's all kinds of stuff going on. And I think that you get a good cross section of that as well. So those were kind of my thoughts. And I have if you have 45 KPIs, you have enough KPIs. You probably we
need those succinct few,
Yeah.
if you can think of them. Yes.
you need help cutting those down, but I don't have the list of 45, so I can't provide anything there. So that's all I have, and Councilmember Perales has something else.
I'm sorry, I do. On the slide, the downtown commute trips, I just was curious, because since we're already going to hit 2020, where are we at? And can you add that into, could that have been added to this slide, or can you? Oh, you passed it up.
This is
5.
Oh, I was curious on the slide, or
this
on
one.
the image. I'm sorry, not that one, the next one.
The types of commute trips by mode. Yeah. That one.
That one, yeah.
Where are we on this right now?
Well, I mean, we're just, if I drew a line between 2015 and 2025, since we're going to hit 2020, are we anywhere near our goals?
We don't have updated information to
Okay.
say that yet. That's why we need to go by this data through this process to kind of get a better sense of that.
Okay, I'd be curious once we get the updated data, just to kind of see where
Yeah.
we're landing.
Yeah, so will we.
Thanks.
All right, just so I don't give you the last word, I'm gonna something you said I wanted to echo about making it more difficult for cars to go downtown. We're basically already doing that with construction, and I know you and I, Councilmember Perales, have had this, which is I think it's totally fine, because it's actually getting to the point where it takes me. I'm only saving like 5 minutes by going in my car to City Hall from my house, and then it's versus taking a bike. And so like I'm almost at the tipping point where it just makes sense to ride my bike to City Hall, because
You tried those electric bikes yet? They kind of work.
well, so they took them off
They're back.
Oh,
they're back. They're back as of last week.
All right, maybe that makes the difference, and I'm going with Lyft. Thanks. All right, on the motion, all in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Thank you for this report. And I think we have micromobility up next.
We
Right?
do, yes. And we're ready to jump in, Andrea. Amador will be doing the presentation. She's our resident expert czar.
Excellent, thank you.
Good afternoon. Oh, sorry. My name is Andrea Arjona Amador, and I'm the new transportation specialist, filling in the position approved by council to manage the shared micromobility permit program.
Might want to speak a little bit closer to the mic.
Sure. So in this presentation, I will provide a general overview of the status of the permit program, and I will provide some details about the steps that the Department of Transportation has taken to assess the sidewalk technology requirement and the progress that operators have made to make sure that they can actually implement these technologies in the entire city. I will also provide a general overview of the status of program management, and leading to the questions that we have prepared as we improve our systems and processes to make sure that we can effectively manage the program. So right now we have approved 5 operators to operate in the city of San Jose, 5 e-scooter operators with a total of 5,600 scooters. Those are Lyft, Bird, Lime, Spin, Clever, and we are processing a new permit application from Razor. That's the typical scooter company that now has e-scooters. We have seen quite a big uptake from low-income users in San Jose compared to other cities, even though we have gathered limited information about low-income ridership in the city. We estimate that we probably have about 3 million trips completed by scooter in the city of San Jose. That's pretty significant, and we are seeing new applications for a variety of devices that can support different type of users. So for example, the Razor scooter has a seating option for people that have more limited mobility. So that's kind of like interesting coming up. In terms of safety, we're really focusing on improving parking etiquette. We did a survey of parking, scooter parking, focused on downtown, which is the area where we see a little bit more of an oversaturation of scooters and more complaints about scooter parking. And we found that most of the scooters are actually adequately parked in downtown San Jose, and only a small percentage are illegally parked per our current regulations. And what that indicates to us is that even if there's a small percentage of scooters that are illegally parked, those generate such a discomfort among some residents. So we're trying to figure out how we can develop more restrictive parking policies in areas of concern. So perhaps developing designated drop-off and pick-up zones in some areas of downtown. So we're starting looking at some of these alternatives for improving safety related to parking and improving accessibility to pedestrians. We're also closely looking at the speed limit cap, making sure that all operators are meeting the 12 mile per hour citywide cap. And we're working with operators to try to improve their processes in verifying that the user that is actually lending the scooter is over 18 years old. We're most concerned about tandem riding with minors, so we're also working a lot in outreach and education campaigns to make sure that they address this situation. So in terms of sidewalk riding, DOT developed an evaluation schedule to try to assess, to better assess how or what technologies operators are trying to apply and how successful these technologies are. So at this stage, we are seeing already some presentations of some results of data that operators have gathered regarding to these specific technologies. And these are in general technologies related to geofencing and machine learning based technologies. So basically, they take different streams of data on the street and they improve models to develop capabilities to prevent sidewalk riding or slow down scooters. So right now, we expect to be able to evaluate or fully assess the applicability of these technologies and the scalability by January 2020. And depending on how much or how well operators can actually prevent sidewalk riding or reduce sidewalk speeds to 5 miles per hour, we are thinking about developing a more incentive-based approach and determining which operators are in full compliance, and to those operators maybe provide some incentives like allowing them to increase speeds in other parts of the city, or increase deployment caps if we determine that there should be deployment caps in specific areas. For operators that are in partial compliance, then they would not be eligible to any of these incentives, but they would be encouraged to continue to test their technology applications. And for the operators that still need to work in their technology applications, they may get restrictions on the number of deployments that they can have in the city of San Jose to make sure that they will not clutter or cause hazards in streets with high pedestrian volume. Another aspect of the program that we're really emphasizing right now is education and outreach. So we are sharing with operators a plan to make sure that they deploy enough outreach and engagement activities and events to educate users about designated parking areas, about where to park the scooters in downtown San Jose or in other areas, about how to reach out to low-income members. And we've been working with other city departments as well to try to improve these outreach opportunities. So we've been talking with Viva Calle, we've been talking with housing to make sure that they reach out to members of the community that would benefit from these programs. In terms of program management, we don't have yet a lot of tools for enforcement, so we're making sure that we develop those. So we're trying to get a data analytics company to develop a data dashboard for micromobility so we can have a better overview of things like the number of times a scooter is being used per day. So we have some overview of that, but we would like to have much more detailed information so we can do better enforcement and better planning. We were also thinking about getting additional on-street support to monitor parking violations, and also to make sure that we can work with other cities and see what they have done that would be applicable to the city of San Jose. So the idea is to move from a permit administration point that we're right now to a point where we can actually integrate micromobility to the entire transportation system and have a more multimodal kind of like approach to planning. So as we've gone this far, we would like to get your input regarding what we have developed for sidewalk technology. Do you agree with this incentive-based approach? And we'd also like to get your input regarding our purpose of developing designated parking areas, for example, in specific areas of downtown where we see more issues with scooter parking. And that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one comment card. Blair?
Hi, thank you. I am sorry if I did not make clear in the past few years that this item, its data collection and its surveillance technology, the geofence things, has had some grave connections to U.S.-Mexico border security. What I did try to make clear is that it doesn't have to be a chore for San Jose to prepare good, open accountability practices for this tech. And why not make this a part of your educational process? This possibly very small, hidden, well-hidden covert tech from Diridon Station along San Fernando and then between 1st and 4th Streets in downtown is some of the very surveillance and data collection technology of why I'm here week after week, year after year. We are at a time we can all better contribute to ideas of peace and to a more stable, responsible, better reasoned, more organized process of good human rights and civil rights guidelines that are meant to address the digital future, community IoT technology, surveillance technology, data collection, and cybersecurity questions, and that can actively work to end an era of 9/11 and continual war. We can all take part in this now. With all of this said, I hope I can again remind the city that the city of Davis, California is using the ACLU Surveillance and Tech Ordinance and has developed good open surveillance tech guidelines and practices for their wildlife spaces and trails that should be important for yourselves in this issue. And to also remind, the Measure T Public Oversight Board will not only have to be good with Coyote Valley land issues, but needs to be open and progressive with Measure T tech issues as well. I hope they can be up to date on public accountability and oversight practices, and will be open-minded when there will be questions possibly too difficult to better answer at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. To my colleagues, Councilmember Perales.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, thank you for the report. It's nice to, to actually have now had some time to have a policy in place and to not have this be such a surprising and sort of new issue, right? And this feels comfortable, right, to have this level of data and partnership. And so I appreciate the opportunity to chime in on some of these. So first off, this one's, I guess, more timely. I'm curious if we can do what we did during the, I think it was the College National Championship, where we sort of block off, right now, Christmas in the Park. So do the same thing. And is that something that's possible to get the word out and get all the companies to then make it where it slows it down to 1 mile an hour or something like that?
Yeah. So right now we have a manual process to give them a defined area. San Jose State being one the kind of most known one, right? If you ride around San Jose State, you get stopped. Yeah. Right. So we can do that, and we're also part of the software purchase that we're doing is based on a data standard that we're on the board of that oversees it, and part of that data standard is specifically a policy expression, which mostly is places not to go. Right,
and how quickly can that be rolled out then if we were to do that?
Andrea will be putting emails out probably later today, and
right.
We'll figure that out. It's usually within a couple days.
Okay.
Is the response.
I just, given the number of people that we have walking around the park, having the scooters zooming through, and I was there actually working as a reserve officer on Saturday, and even though it was raining, there was still a lot of actually kids doubled up. Maybe it was Deb's daughter.
It wasn't.
I just learned that she did it, so I'm not.
She does it all the time, but she was not downtown this weekend.
But they do, right? And unfortunately, right, if they're going into an area that's highly populated with a lot of pedestrians and people that aren't expecting to see, right, then we're just asking for it. So that, I think, would be good. So that's just sort of a more immediate. The other one would be just trying to figure out a way to actually stop the youth that are riding it. We already know that it's pretty difficult to get people to wear a helmet. I feel like I'm publicly shamed all the time because I'm always wearing my helmet, and the people are, looking at me weird, like this guy in a suit with a helmet riding the scooter. So I think that's going to be a challenge just in general. So if we could, though, prevent, young kids from riding or doubling up or you name it, and I know it's not a priority for the police department. They're not going to go out there and cite it, but what I read in here, what I liked was the opportunity of having a third party, right, that could cite for the parking violations. Is it possible that this third party could also issue a citation for no?
No. Sorry. So we've consulted with the city attorney's office about this, and the idea is that the third party would provide enforcement support. So it would collect information, and the city will issue the citations. And we've already set up a citation process.
And so it would only be a police officer or a code enforcement officer then that could issue a cite, or just a police officer?
We can do administrative sites. We can do administrative sites under his power.
Yeah.
So it could be parking compliance.
Yeah,
okay.
but not moving violations. That has to be, that's a police action, and one we can't take, as we understand it, we are not able to like take information and have them process it afterwards.
Yeah.
Right, and so enforcement issues are real there. But it is worth noting, one of the interesting things we've seen is it Revel? Reveal? Revel. They do the electric mopeds that they share, and so they're talking to us right now about whether they want to come to town. And one of the things they do is they actually do facial recognition for every single ride.
Oh.
Right, so you have to go in, you check in your driver's license and say, this is me. That creates the facial recognition stamp. Right, and then every single time someone wants to ride, they actually have to do a facial recognition again. Now, some of us, maybe we let our daughters go with our face, not
I don't let her, just for the record.
Sorry, I
It is totally
should have explained. Should have explained what's
using
going on.
her friends' accounts with other parents who are more permissive than us.
Sure. There'll always be that, but at least that's at least a really interesting, very like no new technology kind of implementation that we're since we're seeing it there, maybe we'll start kind of pushing it along in the other way.
Yeah, I do think that trying to get at some of these minors and that are doing exactly what we see, right, the doubling up and stuff. That I would love to see what we can do more to be able to stop. And if I just don't think we're going to get the police department to prioritize some proactive, enforcement of it anytime soon. If we do think we could get, I know that we have some parking patrol that rides around on bikes through the downtown core. So anyways, I definitely think that would be beneficial to try and stop that. This sounds like a great, one way, to prohibit that. But it would not be foolproof.
So in the meantime, the sort of these kind of applications mature and they get standardized along different operators. We're trying to focus a lot on education and outreach. So we're trying to develop a single messaging, specific about minor riding and tandem riding, and hopefully operators will be able to release that specific message from February or March when they start ramping up again their outreach and education. And that's not just physically at specific locations around San Jose, but also via their app. So making sure that they're not doing like multiple messages, but one targeted message related to that specifically.
Yeah, and even when enforcement is to come, I think even let's say our police department said, okay, we will try to enforce. I don't even understand how that would happen, right? Because we're not going to chase down somebody on a scooter, right, and stop them. So, because even at Christmas in the Park, they're zooming by and you're like, hey, you're supposed to be 18, and they're gone. So, anyways, I definitely think that's something we should be considerate of, because like was in the report here, we had reported, right, that we know of one 17-year-old involved in a crash. I can guarantee you there's a ton more minors out there getting in crashes. They're just going home with bumps and bruises. And so fortunately, they're not getting hit by a car at the moment and where it's making the news. And so that's where I'd like to avoid. And so for me, even knowing some of these other things that we won't be able to enforce completely, like the next thing I'll talk about, which is the speed cap, it would be getting those kids, to not be riding them. So the speed cap itself, one of the main interests I had in putting a speed cap at the 12 miles an hour to start was because this is such a new technology, and almost everybody that was riding it for the first time. And the last thing you want to do is put somebody riding it for the first time and have them go really fast, because then now they're destined to crash. At least if they're going slow or semi-slow, right, then they crash, or it's easier to manage that. And I do know that was something that the scooter companies pushed back a little bit on, and we even have one of the big violators out there is still Bird, which I thank you for denoting that. I recently rode it with a couple friends, and there were 2 limes and a bird. One of my friends, it was his first time riding it ever, and he happened to grab the bird, and I just kind of knew it too, and I was like, hey, that one might be a little, and he's just like, he got scared, and he actually stopped it, and we switched, because he even the just giving it the little, go, it was too fast. So I would like, and I do think that this can be something that's phased in. We talked about maybe opening up the speeds in other areas outside of the downtown core first. And I think even, we can talk about in the future, a year or so from now, do you open up the speed, a couple miles an hour in the downtown core once, they're not so new, people have had an opportunity to ride them, but I do still think that having that cap is really, really helpful for both new riders and the fact that all the population of people that with the density we have downtown, it's just so much easier to manage. And look, 12 miles an hour is sufficient. I mean, I've ridden it, and it's not like you're crawling out there. You'll ride it, and it still gets you much faster than you would be walking.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So one of the things that we're trying to figure out is, look, we have this industry-first approach to sidewalk safety riding, right? We're the only city in the country that has this must figure out how to detect sidewalks and figure that out. Some of the companies are working very, very hard on meeting this. Some are papering things over, but okay. What we want to do is create some kind of enforcement approach that first looks at carrots. And so the question is, would you be open to the companies that prove that they can do this? They can control speeds in the given area that we said, hey, this is the part we really care about. You've done the hard work of meeting us there, giving them the speed incentive. And I do think outside the downtown and outside, and not only downtown, I mean, you don't want them flying down, Lincoln Ave either, right? It's these kind of places where there's lots of density. We start creating, in a sense, kind of speed maps, which we can now express through the software we're supposed to get. Would you be open to the idea of, when someone's cruising down 10th and 11th, for example, you got this big, huge, nice wide lane, and you have, traffic going much faster. In those kinds of places, it seems like a really great incentive, and we've floated this with the companies. They really see this as an incentive for them to kind of get to our point. Would you be open to opening the speed table for them outside of these core areas?
Absolutely, I personally would, and I think it's a great idea to incentivize that. And if you can go to the map of the zones, the sidewalk enforcement. So, and I do think that even when let's say that we had it perfect today and we had it blocked off on certain sidewalks. I wouldn't want it to be blocked off on every single sidewalk. It would be, in my mind, the same way we do bicycle enforcement in the downtown core, which is when there is a bike lane, right, a safe passage for you, then you shouldn't be on the sidewalk, right? You should be in this brand new buffered bike lane that we've, innovatively put into the downtown core and not on the sidewalk with pedestrians walking. But when you don't have that sidewalk to go onto, I definitely don't want to incentivize scooters to then be riding in the roadway. And so in that sense, I think even the full build out of what sidewalks we would have prohibited isn't that much. And so I do think that, right, if we can find a way to creatively, block that with these, and the companies that figure it out and are able to do it, much like they do around San Jose State, and like we've talked about these bigger areas, if we can get them to figure that out around these smaller areas, then absolutely I think it's worth the incentive to say, okay, so for you, and I guarantee you, riders will know right away. They'll know Lime hit it, and Lime is going 3 miles an hour faster, and so I'm going to take a Lime. So I think that incentive is worth it to be able to try to get them to get there. So in regards to the I wanted to talk a little bit about the vandalism, because I know that we've seen a lot of them end up in our waterways, and thank you for writing that in here. We did get support from SJPD in this regard and Lime, as you guys may be aware, to do a sting operation and to catch somebody that did that. So as much as SJPD, right, was saying we're not going to prioritize enforcement of at least these violations, they're certainly not stopping from criminal activity like this, and that did really help. And so I just want to give kudos to them for helping us with that. And we know that we see this vandalism happen, and so it's nice to know that if it does and we see an uptick, that we can work with SJPD to help us to stop some of that. If you don't mind going back to the picture where you showed where we could sort of designated parking zones. So this is actually the #1 complaint that my office gets downtown is the clutter on where they're parked. Still being parked, right, blocking, the right of way, blocking doors, blocking the on-ramps or the ADA ramps. It's gotten a lot better, but at the same time, this is still the #1 complaint that we got, that we continue to get. When I was in Long Beach, I saw this exact thing, which was the painted, just certain, it wasn't all over the place, but there were certain designated areas where, and we know where they're at now because the scooter companies, every morning, right, their chargers, the independent, contractor employees chargers that charge them overnight and then bring them out. They have the designated zones where they like to bring them out to. I think we could help in that regard and work together to find, okay, where are some places that we're willing to dedicate. And it's just with paint, right? So it's not that, we're giving up anything potentially, right? And they're already out there. So how do we, with paint, show, then that way as the riders know, okay, this is the place I should be parking it. And again, it doesn't have to be everywhere, but I think we can, in the high rider areas, have some of these striped. So I definitely agree with this in the parking, that we should consider that and move forward with some of those opportunities. And the last one was in regards to the enforcement, which I already talked about. And I do look forward. I think it's a bummer, unfortunate, right? We can't really address the kids riding them, but just to be able to enforce and put a little pressure on the companies for some of the other violations, I think it will be helpful to have that third-party contractor. That's it. Thanks.
Councilmember Esparza.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to your question about the carrot to expand the speed limit increases. What would that increase be?
So typically, the fastest scooters go up to 60 miles per hour. 16. 1.6. Yeah. It's not much. But,
so it would go from 12 to 16?
Yeah, so the differential speed between 12 and 16 is actually pretty big on a scooter.
And so one of my questions, I'm very comfortable with expanding like the fleet size. The speed, I would still have questions about, especially if we open up. So I've been talking with some companies who are looking to expand and District 7 and have, they're looking at having scooters go down major thoroughfares where traffic is going pretty fast. And I'm not sure having a scooter, even with the small increase, is very safe. What do we know about that, speeds and safety?
So scooters are typically, or e-scooters are typically designed for a specific street environment. So they are not designed to go on a street that goes, over 30 miles per hour. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So these are not like the environments for scooters. That's why we're thinking about introducing different types of shared micromobility devices, like the moped device that Ramses mentioned before, because these devices would go up to 20-25 miles per hour. They're still designed to go into, neighborhood streets, like inner street, not highways or bridges, but they go a little bit faster. They have a lower center of gravity, and they just will cater to a different type of user that would need that speed, for example, in areas of the city where there are voids of public transportation, and maybe that becomes an option. In terms of implementing a incentive to increase speeds, I think we will carefully look at whether or not the company not just can prevent sidewalk riding, but also we can see the overall product safety as well of the scooter. Is the scooter sturdy enough to actually be able to go that fast? And also in general the company's behavior. So some operators are very diligent in providing us with information about how they're keeping the 12 mile per hour limit via standardized testing under standardized conditions. And other operators are always like, oh, I'm so sorry, I think some scooters came from another market and were not properly capped. So that's another thing that we could consider when determining which operator is capable of handling a higher speed differential.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm also comfortable with what Councilmember Perales said about sort of designating some spaces. One of the things that I've been thinking about is how can we encourage scooters, especially as San Jose State and Sharks Eye sort of is going to experience some construction, but the city owns Kelly Park, right? So that's city owned. There's San Jose Giants, there's San Jose State and Sharks Ice. It's kind of a no-brainer to be able to take a scooter or what is it, the Lyft bicycle, or at least maybe do that kind of multimodal, take the bicycle or some of the way, or drive in one place, park there, pick up your lifts or your bicycle, e-bikes, and then do the rest of the way, because frankly, we don't have space for everybody in these places, bless you. And we control that land. So maybe there's a cool little docking place that we can put as we encourage families to bike or scooter that last mile. And the fairgrounds is another place that's kind of a no-brainer for folks to drive part of the way, park someplace, and then can take the rest of the way there, because when they have big events, which is every weekend, there are hordes and hordes of people and cars coming down that Monterey corridor. So I think that those are opportunities to offer carrots, right, for companies to have that increased reach. I would love to see the city develop those partnerships further. The speed, though, I'm uncomfortable with expanding the speed. Thanks.
Councilmember Arenas.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a question about the low-income shared program. And I know we're working on I think it's an RFI or RFQ. You'll be soon announcing who we've chosen for the dashboard, or who would develop it. And I don't know the intricacy of that RFQ, but I just wanted to make sure that we're taking a look at like the enrollment, because this the data table that you have here on page 7 just has the enrollment numbers, right? But it doesn't have the geography, and it doesn't have the utilization of those scooters. And so I wanted to make sure that we're going to get that through the RFQ, which I'm heads nodding yes.
Yes, we definitely expect to be able to have that reliable information once we get our own dashboard.
Wonderful. So the second question is, how are we encouraging or making connections for some of those scooter companies with organizations that already serve our community in some of those, however you want to say it, low income, underrepresented, hard to reach communities, but these are the folks that we are targeting, which are low income, right? So what efforts have we made to kind of make those two connections?
Yeah, so we've, compiled a robust list of all these organizations in the city of San Jose and shared it with operators, and we are now encouraging them to go and do outreach and engagement events at these places, in alliance with the Downtown San Jose Association and other neighborhood associations, to make sure that they are actually reaching out to this population.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned in the presentation, the city of San Jose is actually not doing that bad. It's actually doing very well in terms of signing up to these e-scooter low-income programs compared to other cities.
Mm-hmm.
So we see, for example, Lyft has been able to do a great job in signing up people, and that's kind of like an inheritance they have from the Motivate experience with the e-bikes. So they've been very successful with the low-income program for bike share, and they were able to transfer that to the e-scooter program. And I think the city of San Jose is the most successful low-income program for Lyft, even more successful than for the city of Oakland or the city of San Francisco. So we don't have yet, a lot of information from other operators, perhaps because some of them just pretty much launched in the city of San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
But we are definitely pushing to make sure that they will engage these individuals in their outreach and efforts.
Yeah, at this point, it's just a good faith effort, because we're not monitoring. We're not asking them for a certain level of compliance. I know it's 20%, right?
Yeah.
But we're not asking them to reach that 20% in 6 months, in a year, in...
From the day they get permitted, they need to deploy 20% of their fleet in those areas of concern. So the question that we still have is, how successful are they in reaching out to low-income members to make sure that low-income materials, for example, are accessible. So most operators are still working on developing Vietnamese, for example, language materials. So we're following up on all of these things to try to make sure that they have all the tools that they would need to reach out to those members of the community. And we try to accompany them as much as possible in that.
Thank you. I know that we've just finished talking about reaching hard to reach populations, and I would see that this is, if they doubled up on our efforts that we already have, that they could get to these communities. So I don't know what the total number that Lyft has of registered users, but this is 492 low-income users, and I don't know what the total number is, and I don't know if that really is 20% of it. Lime has 160. I venture to say that they have more than this, and this is probably not 20% of their total users.
So, not sure. Hey, look at that, it is working. Okay, good. So the 20% requirement is a geographic requirement, and the low income program requirement is a requirement that you offer a deeply discounted program for low income users. We currently don't have a requirement that says X number of your users or X% of your users should be low income. It's something that we're happy to take input on, but currently that's the 20% is geographic, and the requirement around having a low income program is that it exists and meet our objectives.
Yeah, sometimes those two intersect, but for Evergreen, it's a community of concern. Not because of income, but because of geography, right? So we don't see as many scooters as I would like to see, right? But I think it makes sense out there because it's so huge in terms of, right, the rest of the districts, we're like 3 times as large as District 5. So you would think that we would need some of these scooters to get from from our home to the community center, our home to the nearest CVS store. I'd like to see more of that in my community, as well as, there's a lot of use from our college campus, right? I don't know that we're maximizing that. And I'm not trying to compete with our bike park, but there's enough for everybody to go around, right? At Lake Cunningham, there's also an opportunity for people to enjoy all of the lake through a scooter, because you can't take the bike rentals from the bike park outside of the bike park. So how do we see the rest of the park? I know some people, it's novelty, you walk, but but it would be really nice for our folks who are using scooters as a way to be mobile, and maybe it was something that helps facilitate their mobility to be able to enjoy the different parts of our city. So thank you for distinguishing, for delineating both of those. But I think, I think for the most part, communities of concern are kind of the low income. But as you've said, you haven't set any low income user criteria. Is there a reason for that?
So we looked at different e-scooter programs in California and elsewhere, and this is pretty much like the industry standard to require about a 20% of their fleet to be dispersed in geographic areas of low-income communities, and I think that standard also looks at the ability of the company to meet that. So right now, the rates of scooter rentals are pretty low compared to what the companies believe that they could charge.
Mm-hmm. So Jessica, you just finished telling me that these two are kind of separate streams, but now we're kind of making a combo on this.
So the requirement in our program is that you deploy the scooters in communities of concern, at least 20% of those, and many more are, and that you have a program that if you qualify for any low-income program, existing program, PG&E Care, et cetera, that you can get this discount. But there's no percentage target requirement at this time for how many actual low-income users you should have as a percentage of your user base.
And the 20%, right, is only for the communities of concern, which we said it might be one and the same, but not all the time.
That's
like
right.
I used my example for Evergreen.
Right.
Now, I don't know how you, I guess, if you could help me identify what the community of concern, what does that mean? Does it mean geographically difficult?
It's a map that's actually produced by MTC that gives us certain demographics and income information crossed with each other to give us kind of the legally defined communities that fit under that category. We're very happy to send you that map.
Okay, so it's a legally defined. Okay,
Yeah.
so I may say that I'm a community concern, but it may not be true.
And
Just in my heart.
the discount that operators are required to provide is 50% of their current fee. So that would be at the very least, but some operators are actually doing much more than that, and that's the case of Lyft. So another thing that we would look at is actually how much can really these communities afford, and are the income programs sufficient, the low income programs sufficient?
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing who gets this award at the end of December. I'm guessing you're very close to this.
So are we.
So, well, congratulations on all the work that's led you up to this point, and hopefully we'll hear soon some congratulatory news. Thank you.
Councilmember Diep?
So I'm aware we're nearing the witching hour. We're the first in the nation, or the only city in the nation, as far as I'm concerned or aware of, that is asking about this kind of like sidewalk restriction thing. Is that correct?
The initial request came from our mayor as well as
Right.
the Santa Monica mayor,
Okay.
but they did not codify it in the same way as we did in Santa Monica in their regulations.
So like, why are the four of you not on the front cover of like Popular Mechanics, or like I feel like we're not getting like, you know, the credit we deserve for kind of like spearheading this somehow. I feel like
Let's get the credit when we start solving it, because
Okay.
right now we might look like we're bumbling around.
but I guess
we are quite well recognized in the industry as pushing it, and a lot of the companies are very excited to work with us around it.
Okay.
And we'd love to kind of push it out there. Andrea gets to go to a lot of places to talk about it because of it as well. But we'd love to do a lot of press and kind of stuff around it once we have a few companies who have actually solved it.
Okay.
It's an incredibly difficult problem to solve.
And on that point, are we trying to herd them towards a open source, like shared system, or are they each one going to be proprietary? So it's like, you know, 1,000 flowers bloom and just kind of like compete?
What we're seeing is a few different approaches. One using kind of the retail Bluetooth beacons you may know of that used in stores to kind of pinpoint where people are. Some companies who claim to have centimeter geolocation technologies, Clever, whose Groove cycles or scooters are out there, claims that. And a lot of them are looking at machine learning through sensor data on the scooter. So, you know, the accelerometers that give vibration analysis. The only one that seems to have given us we actually think we can solve this pretty soon is Clever with their geolocation technology, but their scooters that have them right now don't have it turned on. So we're kind of seeing a lot of different things out there. We do see convergence in most of the companies looking at machine learning from sensor suites on the scooters themselves. But nobody has actually solved this problem yet to our satisfaction.
So are the cities asking the city, because I feel like the city should have a part in this, in the sense of like, if even we're just putting down like geotag markers along our sidewalks, like sensors somewhere. I don't know how this works, but I would imagine there has some role for us in the city to kind of like put down breadcrumbs where the boundaries are or something to help somehow. And I don't know if we are, but
so we'd rather not.
Sure.
Right?
Understood.
We'd rather just say, hey, streets that have bike lanes alongside them, you should be able to sense where you are on those, and that's it. We've given them this map here,
Right.
And said, sense these places. If this is going to scale, We can't put Bluetooth beacons every 400 feet, which is what it requires for that technology to work along the right of way in any scalable way. If they want to pay for that, maybe, but do we want to see that?
And I don't have a preconceived kind of preference, but as we're pushing this, and I'm glad we're kind of trying to push the industry in this direction, but do we want a general like open source shared kind of system where that's scalable and replicable in Los Angeles or Santa Monica or like Austin, Texas or wherever else? Or do we kind of want to push like, you know, Clever is the first company that gets there. They suddenly are sitting on like a gold mine of proprietary like software data that they can just kind of keep on going with. Like, I don't have a preference either way, but has staff thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're thinking about it, and a lot of the companies are talking to us about it, and we've said this to a lot of them. If somebody solved this, we would like you to share, right? The airline industry works on that basis, right? If somebody has a safety improvement, they're not allowed to market on that. They have to share it, right? And so it's definitely a good model. Are we set on implementing that yet? I think it's too early days to kind of say. And a company like Clever, they have like, I think 200 scooters in our city, by far the smallest deployment. Their object is to create technology that they can sell, right? And so if that's what motivates the market to actually create the thing, let's let them do it, right? I think we've been given really great instruction by leadership here and you guys to like let this market kind of do its thing, and so that's what we continue to do with this.
Okay, and with you know, the full compliance, partial compliance, non-compliance. I mean, when we voted on that ordinance however long ago, I was under the impression, I was surprised to see like Lime and Razor and you know, Lyft like still have scooters, because I thought we were essentially banning them until they figured it out. And so now I'm seeing this, and you know, if you're able to solve the problem, you're eligible for your fleet size and speed limit increases in specific areas. If you're partially compliant, and I'm not exactly sure what that means, but if you can do it partially, you're not eligible. And then if you're non-compliant, so I guess my question is, once somebody hits the goal, we know that it's doable, why are we even allowing non-compliance at all? Do we even want, like, I don't want a monopoly. So let's say we say the first 3 companies or the first 4 companies to solve it, you're allowed to be in San Jose. Everybody else, like, leave San Jose unless you're able to, let's say, serve our underprivileged populations and put like, you know, 40% of your fleet towards these areas or something like that. Like, that's where I'm thinking, because why would we have this rule up there and then allow a non-compliance, even a restricted fleet?
Yeah, that's exactly the reason, because of what you said. So partial compliance means that the operator has done great efforts to meet the requirement, but is not there yet, cannot effectively reduce the speeds of the scooters to 5 miles per hour, you know, 99% of the times, but maybe 75. So it still needs to work a little bit more to meet that requirement. So these operators that are in partial compliance, that are almost there, they will not receive incentives, but they would definitely be encouraged to continue to improve that technology. Operators that are in non-compliance are those that really are far from meeting that goal. So they, instead of an incentive, they will be restricted. So they will not be allowed to deploy a great part of their fleet, for example, in the preferred market share area. So they would have to deploy that fleet in other areas that are underserved from the e-scooter market. So the idea is to use that sort of like incentive-based restriction mechanism to make sure that scooters are, you know, the ones that can meet are in the preferable market share areas, and the ones that cannot really, you know, work on something else. Is it equity? Is it, you know, expanding the fleet?
Sure. And I guess the last 2 things is just with the speed thing, I don't really use a scooter. I've been on a scooter once or twice. I don't use it. I still like walking. But I also know that statewide, we can't enforce the helmet rule. So I really don't have a sense of 16 miles an hour plus, you know, 12, what the differential is in terms of safety. Just hearing it, I'm a bit concerned, especially since we can't enforce the helmet thing. So I would rather kind of incentivize it by, you know, markets and where you can deploy and not, if you can fulfill this. But I have seen the designated parking spots. I forget where, I think in DC or somewhere, but I think it looks neater, and it creates a kind of a civic, I don't know, propriety or manners or something, and so you get trained on it. So I think I would support moving towards that, and I'll yield the 15 minutes left to the chair.
Well, both Councilmember Perales and Esparza have a follow-up, and I'll call on Esparza first.
Thanks. So I had a question going back to the communities of concern that Councilmember Arenas brought up. That's within the perimeter, correct? Is that citywide or within
The entire operation area.
And then I just heard you say that we're putting non-compliant scooter companies are allowed to put scooters that don't comply with speed or sidewalk requirements in poorer parts of the city? Tell me I'm wrong.
You're definitely wrong.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Can you restate that, please?
So what we're talking about up here is the sidewalk technology regulation, which is a first in the nation, and we're pushing the entirety of this market around through this. And so what we don't want to do is make a whole bunch of companies disappear that really are giving a service to the city that we really like in terms of first and last mile and all of these things, unless they're really flippant, really not working with us, right? Watch language. Right. So no, and definitely on the speed thing. No. That's a standard. We are proposing an option of saying if they meet these other requirements that are very difficult to do, that we would allow them to go faster in other parts of the city. That's just a proposal, and those are definitely separate. So we're definitely not doing that very awful thing of dumping things in certain parts of the city.
Cool. Thank you.
And I would like to clarify, maybe the language is a little bit harsh, but non-compliance doesn't mean that the operator is not working on this. So all of the operators are actively engaged in this. And some of them have been able to do greater improvements than others. But there is no single operator that is not fully committed to meet this requirement. So we don't have any operator that is like a bad actor that we would, ask him to deploy in another area. It's simply in areas where there is very high volumes of pedestrian activity, they would not be able to have like a large deployment. But in other areas where there are not such high volumes of pedestrian activity, so nothing to do with communities of concern, but instead, where they could actually be operated safely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Perales.
So in regards to what you just were saying, I wanted to reiterate, I do think increased speed within the downtown core too could be another level of incentive. Maybe it's for the full compliance level. But because I would like to see that as an opportunity within the downtown core. I wanted to respond to what Councilmember Diet was saying, and Ramsey's and the team here already knows it. I completely want to avoid and am completely against any sort of installation of a device or nodes or any sort of thing that helps the companies to do this, to be in compliance with staying off our sidewalks. I do not want to install anything throughout the sidewalks of the downtown core, especially knowing that when we reached out to the different companies, they each said they would need their own. Right, and so now we're talking about it. So it just, I want to avoid that altogether. I think we can achieve it the same way we've achieved it in larger areas like San Jose State. Right, we're just talking about at a smaller scale, and so I just want to reiterate that. But I think the team knows it. So, and then I agree with what our chair is about to say, if you say
it. We really have to stop having a side conversation. So the comment that Councilmember Perales thinks I'm going to make, which I am going to make, is that the non-compliance, we got to put a timeline on that and then say, if you're not compliant after a certain time, like, sorry, we're not renewing your permit, we're revoking them, you can't be here. Because if we have multiple operators that are in partial and full compliance, then we know it's not a tech problem, it's a will, right? And so that carrot or that stick needs to be a lot sharper, I think, with a time limit. Is that the one you agreed with?
Hashtag mom talk.
There you go. I have more mom talk, actually. Because I'm not just a killjoy for my minor daughter who should not be riding these scooters. I'm going to be a killjoy about the speed limit increases. I think we have to tie it to that facial recognition so we can get minors off of those scooters, especially the faster scooters. The other thing that gives me pause about the speed limit increases outside the downtown area is the access and mobility plan we just talked about and wanting to have more people walking on sidewalks. if the scooters are going even faster than they already are, and they're on sidewalks, even if it's in currently low traffic areas or low density areas where we're most likely to, I think, have walkers as opposed to other modes, if we want to get people out of their cars in those low density areas, we don't want scooters going really fast on sidewalks. So I would challenge you, I don't have an answer, and I've been sitting here through all my colleagues' comments thinking about this. I don't have an answer, but I would challenge you to think more carefully about those carrots that you're allowing and thinking about it in concert with our access and mobility plan and our multimodal goals, right? Because I don't want scooters to be the enemy of pedestrians. And I can tell you in Willow Glen that that is an issue. We're seeing it on, and I'd like to add, I think we need to have the geofencing on Lincoln Avenue and Willow and Minnesota at a minimum. And we also are having this problem on the Alameda. And there are no bike lanes on the Alameda, so that one's a tricky one. But I think we have to think about that speed limit increase and the riding on sidewalks and the pedestrians. That's very concerning to me. And we've had some, and I will say, I think it's more minor riders than not minor riders who are having those pedestrian scooter negative interactions, right? It's an older walker, a younger scooter rider, and they're just blazing past them on the sidewalk when they shouldn't be. They should be slowing down. They should be throttling their speed. So that is my mom talk. And I would like to entertain a motion. I think, unless there are more comments.
I'll make a motion and I'll add one piece to it. Actually, based on what you just said, this is a good start in regards to what streets we might want to have some sidewalk enforcement. I think we need to have a second tier of that would include some of these other streets that maybe are coming in from other council members to say, hey, actually, this street, we're hearing a lot of concerns and complaints. So I'd like to accept the report with the addition that when we come back, are we coming back at like a year or something, or what?
January? Are you coming back in January?
We had proposed in the report to come back in the spring because of the questions about the sidewalk riding technology that are outstanding. So that's what we had proposed.
So then when we come back in the spring, if you can from now till then have some conversations with some of the other council members to determine are there other, after we get done with this first pilot to see if we can make it work, I think it should be that much easier now to make it work in another area. So.
And would you also add to your motion tying the prevention of minor riding to those incentives as well, please?
Yes.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Thank you so much, DOT team. All right, I think we are on to open forum, and I have two cards. The first is from Kathy Sue McMurray and Ronald Damon. Okay. And then you'll be next, Blair. No worries, just step up all the way to the microphone.
Printed it.
Okay, you can give those to the clerk, and he will pass them to us. Thank you.
I made 5 copies.
No problem. Perfect.
And
thank you.
Honorable Mayor and respected council members, my name is Kathy Sue McMurray. I am representing myself and my husband, Ronald Edward Damon. We live at 4719 Barina Drive, San Jose, 95129. We would like to file a formal complaint against the City of San Jose Trees and Sidewalks Office and to request an exemption from sections 14.16.2200 through 14.16.2270 and Section 13.28.400 of the San Jose Municipal Code, which pertains to trees and sidewalks. Our family has owned and lived at 4719 Barina Drive for 4 generations. Our home was built in 1960. It was the model home for the Strawberry Park housing development. There has never been a tree in our parkway in 59 years, and we have never received notice from the city that one was required in all of those years until November 12, 2019. My husband asked me to take care of the tree issue because he has been busy at Fremont Peak Observatory at Fremont Peak State Park, getting the new siding on the observatory and getting the shutters repaired before the rain started. He is the Director of Instrumentation and Public Programs for Fremont Peak Observers Association and has been an active volunteer for the state park's public programs in astronomy for over 25 years. He also did the morning public programs on Wednesdays and Sundays at the California Academy of Sciences Planetarium in the old building. My husband is an astronomer. Unobstructed sky is critical for what he does. When there is an astronomical event,
Ma'am? Thank you. Your 2 minutes have expired. We have all of your comments, and I will speak with the. Right, public comment is 2 minutes per person. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
So
and-
we have your contact information on the card. Is she your? Yes. So you're a District 1 resident, and I will actually speak with the Department of Transportation. I think they're the ones that handle this.
We will.
So
we'll have follow-up
we will,
with you.
We will
ma'am.
follow up. Thank you. I understand. I have your contact information, and I have all your comments.
I'll take that other
she's got a
one
phone
as
number
well.
on the card.
I'm happy to do that. I'll come to you.
So this is our Deputy City Manager, and he oversees the Department of Transportation. We'll get this resolved. You're welcome. You're welcome. Blair?
Hi, thank you. To note, the geofence will be working in conjunction with San Jose State University. And on the consent calendar tomorrow, you will be approving a $400,000 grant application for airport runway work, I'm pretty sure. Will any of this money be going to a more impartial study on the future of high-rise building height limits? Thank you for supplying car ridership and financial projections for the next 20 years today. It made for openness and better thought, and for myself to see and make better decisions. Thank you. We all can be fallible, and it often takes time to work out and make clear initial plans and good ideas. Tech, surveillance, data collection, and cybersecurity guidelines, accountability, public oversight, and to more openly practice better human and civil rights that were specifically created to work towards ideas of peace, better human reasoning, and sustainability, and to leave an era of 9/11 war and continual war. These are important concepts to myself at this time that I try to talk about. Is it a few or many of local government and everyday community that feel these guidelines and good practices can be hopeful and important to work towards at this time? I have 35 seconds. I hope you can consider minimal practices with Vision Zero and in the future. That is important. I can talk more about this subject later. I'm hopeful San Jose will be continuing to work towards better ideals of Vision Zero into 2020. And it should be of interest that while initial UN and State of California ideas of how the everyday public can be invited to help build public oversight, it should make sense that we can now start to ask these same institutions what can be good public oversight of themselves as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.